Our Uyghur brothers and sisters in China are suffering horrific levels of religious persecution. They are forced to drink alcohol. They're forced to eat pork. Muslim women have to marry non-Muslim Chinese men. They are prevented from praying their salah, and they are forced to renounce Islam and swear allegiance to the Chinese Communist Party. What is Five Pillars doing about this? We have delivered more than 25 lectures at universities and masajid across the UK, raising awareness about this persecution. We have posted these lectures online and they've been shared and translated in more than 10 languages. We have published more than 100 articles and videos on the plight of the Uyghur Muslims on our website, and continue to bring this gross injustice to the attention of the world. But the real question is, what have you done about this? What have you done for our brothers and sisters who are being oppressed in Palestine, in Kashmir, in Myanmar, in Syria, in Yemen and elsewhere? Is sharing an image or a video of their hardship the only thing you're capable of? Or can you be doing a lot more? I'm sure you would agree that as an ummah, we have to be smart and strategic in using the best and most effective tools that Allah has given us. Therefore, supporting qualified and experienced Muslim journalists in raising awareness about the struggle of the ummah and speaking words of truth to tyrants and oppressors in the media is an effective way which you can help. Please click the button and help Five Pillars defend the voiceless and the oppressed in our ummah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, friends, and welcome to another Ramadan live stream with your brother, co-founder, deputy editor of Five Pillars, Dili Hussain. I pray this live appeal reaches you all in the best of health and iman, inshaAllah ta'ala, in this concluding and blessed nights of Ramadan, which we hope, one of which will be Laylatul Qadr, a night which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran is better than 1,000 months. So naturally, it is in these nights, if we have not done enough, or if we felt that we've not done enough, or we feel like the days that have gone previously have been wasted or not been fully benefited from. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, it is these concluding nights where we want to excel and exceed and go above and beyond in our ibadat, in our sadaqah jariyah, in our recitation of the Quran, and begging Allah for His mercy and His forgiveness. Brothers and sisters, before I introduce today's guest, it is important for me to highlight to you why Five Pillars is an initiative and a project which requires your support. We launched in April 2013 as a mere news website, and we covered as much news as possible that two humans could possibly do, given that we were already in full-time jobs. But with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first and foremost, and with the continued support of the community, we are here stronger than ever before, 8 years later. But just because we have achieved many things and because the support is still there, that does not mean the support stops or slows down. Rather, we need the support of the community to increase manyfold. Why do I say this? It's because in the best part of 20 years, the Muslim ummah, whether it be in the West or in the Muslim majority world, have been bombarded with an industrial scale, global, multi-billion-dollar media machine which has made it normal to defame, to dehumanize Islam and Muslims on a daily basis, whether it be on the television networks, whether it be on social media, whether it be on radio broadcasts, whether it be in newspapers. Islam and Muslims are defamed and attacked and devalued on a daily basis. You know this as much as I do, that there doesn't go a single day where there'll be an article or a news report, something about Islam and Muslims, something misrepresenting our beautiful deen and its beautiful tenets and values, or that the collective ummah is blamed at times, many times, for the crimes of a fringe minority, a policy which is not applied to any other faith group in this world. It is in this unfortunate context, it is in this unfortunate socio-political reality that Five Pillars launched in 2013 with noble aims to basically provide a media voice and a platform for the Muslims at a time where we had no voice in the media and not one that truly represented the grassroots views and sentiments of the community. Brothers and sisters, we have set out a humble target for each live appeal. That's £500 in one-off donations and £50 in direct debits. Now, many people have messaged us in the last couple of days and said, brothers and sisters, Dili, why have we set such a low target? I'll explain to you why. The last 13, 14 months has been a difficult one for millions of people around the world. They've lost their jobs, they've been furloughed, they've been made redundant. Businesses have either collapsed or been crippled. And 5 Pillars, like many of the Muslim organizations, have felt the pinch. We have felt the pinch of donations dipping. So therefore, we have set out a realistic and reachable target, which, alhamdulillah, with the permission of Allah, every live appeal we have reached. Alhamdulillah. So brothers and sisters, given that today is one of the last 10 nights, that tonight is an odd night for many, that tonight could be Laylatul Qadr, brothers and sisters, dig deep and donate generously. There will be a donation link that appears. It's also at the ticker below. That's 5pillaruk.com/live or 5pillaruk.com/donate. Our bank details are there below if you're unable to make an online payment. Our PayPal link is at the bottom. And of course, I will be taking phone calls. I love taking phone calls. Why don't you ring us and let us know whether you want to make a donation, whether you have made a donation, whether you want to make a pledge, whether you've shared this appeal. What work of 5 Pillars do you like? What would you like to see more of? What do you think we can do better or improve in? Call me. I love taking phone calls. The number is +44 UK international dialing code 01234 311 311. Brothers and sisters, if you're unable to make a donation for whatever reasons, if it's a case that you do not have the financial means to support 5 Pillars, then at the very least, you can also share in the reward. You can also share the reward by sharing this appeal. How do we know this? If you're unable to donate, you share this appeal on your Facebook, on your YouTube, on your social media, with friends and family and contacts on Telegram and WhatsApp. Someone sees this video, inshallah ta'ala, they can make a donation. We know this happens. We've had phone calls throughout all the live appeals where brothers and sisters have rang in and said, oh, we didn't know this, we saw someone else share it and we made a donation. That person who shared it, inshallah, you'll get a reward as if you made that donation. Why do I say this? Because we know from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, who said that the one who teaches or leads to good, he will get the reward for the good as well. Brothers and sisters, before I introduce today's guest, I want to remind you all that giving sadaqah jariyah does not diminish your wealth. Our beloved Prophet ﷺ told us this. It may decrease the numerical value of your bank account or your cash amount on your wallet at that given time when you donate. But wallahi, brothers and sisters, giving sadaqah jariyah does not diminish your wealth. It is an burhan. It is a testimony to your faith and your iman. It is an investment in this life and the next. It is a means to purify your wealth and cleanse us of our sins. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, and whatever you spend in good, you will be repaid in full and you will not be wronged. Allah tells us that in Surah Al-Baqarah. How beautiful is that verse? But Allah is telling the believers that the wealth I've given you, spend from it in good causes and you will not be wronged and you will be repaid in full. Brothers and sisters, dig deep, dig very deep and donate generously in the defense of Islam and Muslims in the media. Today's guest is someone who wallahi requires no introduction. I mean this because he was someone who I grew up watching. The first time I saw this guest was at my university, University of East Anglia, and he came to deliver a lecture after the launch of his book. I was not a practicing Muslim at that time, but I was in awe of his life experiences. I was in awe of his journey. I was in awe that after his trials and tribulations that he still remained committed for the rights of Muslims and non-Muslims alike who have been facing oppression, especially after the war on terror. He is a dear brother. He is someone whose counsel we at 5 Pillars take very seriously. He is someone who I personally call the godfather of Muslim activism in the UK. He is, there's just simply too many things to say about our dear guest today. And his life experiences and what he has witnessed is something which I do not wish upon anyone else, but there is an ocean of lessons in what he has experienced, what he has witnessed, and what he has seen others witness and experience. And here today, we're going to be talking about how the war on terror has affected the UK Muslim leadership and activism. What has it done? What has it done to the da'wah scene? What has it done to the activism? What has it done to the mindset and the psyche of the Muslims? And that is none other than our dear brother, the outreach director of UK advocacy group CAGE and former Guantanamo Bay detainee, our dear brother Ustad Moazzam Begg. Moazzam, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Akhi Dili. And inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your efforts,
Ameen.
notwithstanding that absolutely self-destructive introduction that you gave of me that completely destroyed my ego. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your efforts and raise your wisdom and raise your ability, give you strength, and to be able to continue in the fight that you're in.
Ameen. By the way, the whole title of you being the godfather of British activism, that's a title I've given you, by the way. I don't know if you've ever heard. There's something
I've never heard this one before. I love the Godfather film, but I never thought I'd be described as one. I don't know. I mean, I take it as a compliment, though. It has different connotations in different places.
Of course. Before I bring in Roshan, I'm going to give our viewers and our listeners, and even yourself and myself, just 30 seconds to basically share this on our social media platform. As I've already mentioned, brothers and sisters, if you're not in a position to donate, sharing this is as important because through you sharing, inshallah, someone could donate. So I'll give you 30 seconds. Roshan, you might as well gear up for today's conversation as well, inshallah, and we'll kick it off. Moazzam, I have sent you the link to forward to our brothers at Cage. I will also, that's another thing as well. So as you've noticed from previous live appeals, Assalamu alaikum, Roshan.
Alaikum salam, Delia. Walaikum salam, Moazzam. How are you doing?
Assalamu alaikum, alhamdulillah. Good to see you, Roshan. Nice. I'm wearing white, you're wearing black. I don't know if that has any connotation, it means anything.
You're good, I'm bad. Light and darkness.
Brothers and sisters, as you know from previous live appeals, we at Five Pillars, we do not exclusivize just fundraising for ourselves. Alhamdulillah, we have encouraged our brothers and sisters from the very first live appeal to give and donate to Cage, as well as other Muslim organizations, SRE Islamic, Hugs, Prevent Watch, IERA, Sapiens Institute. So please, today's live appeal is no different. We will be posting Cage's donation link in the comment section. So please give to them as generously as possible. But inshallah, hopefully after you've given it to us first and foremost. Inshallah. Just give me about 30 seconds, my dear brothers. I'm just going to post some links.
Okay. How's life in Brum, Moazzam?
Alhamdulillah. I don't think I can say this on a live discussion, but Brum is okay, alhamdulillah. It's as good as it's going to get.
And how's your Ramadan going?
Alhamdulillah, Ramadan is always a blessing. You can't say that you'd like it to continue after Ramadan because Ramadan is special, but nonetheless, when this comes to an end, we will of course miss this like we miss every other month. But for me, it's because of COVID, I do more of my prayers at home, and alhamdulillah, I enjoy that solitude, which is precious, that we should all treasure.
I do apologize, my dear brothers. I will kindly ask you to continue with this talk. I'll be with you in about 30 seconds. These links are...
Can I say also for brothers and sisters, if you want, these are these nights, as today is explained, that could be one of the, it could be Laylatul Qadr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ سِرًّا وَعَلَانِيًا لَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. It's a beautiful verse again in Surah Al-Baqarah when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who spend of their wealth hidden or openly, overtly or covertly, in the day and in the night. So their reward is with Allah. لَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ. They have no fear on the day of judgment. وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. And they have nothing to grieve about. And this is the type of language Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses to describe shuhada, those who were killed in Allah's cause. So it's really spending in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because you're defending Muslims, protecting their honor, protecting Islamic beliefs and systems. So spending in this way is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whether you do it openly, hidden, or otherwise, day or night. And so remember that these are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words, and they should encourage you to support organizations of which there are very few that you can say are like Five Pillars.
Jazakumullah khair, Moazzam. My dear brother, let me just kick off by, I've said this to you off camera, that the story of how you were lifted in Pakistan, handed over to the Americans, you spent time at Bagram, and then of course you were taken to Gitmo for over 3 years. This story never gets old, and I can hear it over and over again, especially with the multitude of experiences, the small observations, the large observations, the very unfortunate things that beyond incomprehensible, that we wouldn't actually wish on our worst enemies. That story never gets old. Those stories never get old. But today's theme is how the war on terror, the era in which you were incarcerated, right? And then, of course, you were subsequently released after 3.5, 4 years. Just briefly, how do you think it has affected the UK Muslim leadership and the activist scene, given that there was a time in the UK that you could openly raise funds for the Mujahideen and the war effort in Bosnia? That there was a time that people did go to Afghanistan to fight the Russians when it fitted the foreign policy of Britain. How did 9/11 and the war on terror, how did that affect the mood and the kind of scene in the UK and broadly speaking the West in terms of da'wah and activism?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let me just say that my story may not get old, but I certainly have got old, and my beard is white now, and it was completely black when I came to your university first. So essentially, this story does get old. It ages with people, and my story begins really with the jihad in Bosnia. That's really when I started my kind of activism, as you call it. And it was correct. You could take convoys across Europe. You could go through checkpoints of the British Army in Bosnia itself, and they would wave you through and say hello to you and talk to you and sometimes offer you food and so forth, because they wouldn't see you. They never connected, the word terrorism was never connected directly with Muslims coming from Bosnia to help those who are facing a genocide. If anything, the forces, the British, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Turks, every military of every nation that was there under the United Nations cover knew that they were armed to the teeth, and yet these massacres were taking place in front of them. And yet these ragtag people came from all over the world and tried to assist in whatever way they could and help their Bosnian brothers and sisters. So it wasn't seen as terrorism. You could openly fundraise in the masajid. You could show videos of what's happening in the masajid. And we did so. And we got people to come along and go to drive, take aid, and some people to go and join the foreign volunteer force of the Mujahideen to help in that assistance. And it was never seen as terrorism. In fact, it was seen as stopping genocide. How that narrative has changed, of course, we've seen over the past decades. One man's terrorist, as you say, is another man's freedom fighter. But now today, the term of freedom fighter is not associated with jihad and Mujahideen. It's associated with terrorism. And that is the fault of our leaders here, as much as it's as the fault of the Islamophobic media. It's two together. We buckled and continue to buckle in the face of this onslaught against Muslims and their own language and narrative. And we cease to use the word jihad in its noble, pristine terms because of this fear. And that, I have to say, starts with our imams and our leaders and our du'at and our mashayikh and so forth, who now no longer will speak, nobody will speak of this subject in the way that it needs to be. And as a result of that, we've been on this level, on this subject, to excuse my phrase, we've been castrated. And until somebody is strong enough and brave enough to reclaim this language, we will have lost a very centric part of Islam that was practiced by the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, and it was because of that we're Muslims today.
Could it be argued to some degree, Moazzam, that the fear is something that we have self-internalized, or is it something that's actually was inevitable given the new set of laws that were coming in, the witch hunt of many organizations and du'at, or is it a balance of both? Do you think it was justified fear? Because, let me give you an example. Cage on 5 Pillars in 2019, we held an Uyghur awareness roadshow, London, Manchester, Birmingham. It was, at the time, one of the first of its kind. But no other Muslim organization collectively in that nature was raising awareness about the Uyghur situation. I was delivering lectures around 2017. There was no one that really came and wanted to join arms with us and think, right, this is a good initiative. How can we help? How can we raise awareness? It was only once Britain's policy against China and America's policy against China became something that was anti. Therefore, we started seeing other Muslim organizations obviously speak about it. what I'm basically saying is that is some of this fear justified, or is it a case where we've internalized a lot of it?
I think you posed a very good question. You can see, just for example, I mean, I know we'll have a discussion later, perhaps on some aspects of Syria, but we were here in the UK. People were supporting the Syrian revolution. Everybody was, until British policy and American policy changed in that regard, and then everybody else started to turn away from it. Similarly, with the issue of the Uyghurs, yeah, Muslims got caught onto it late. As you can hear from many of the Uyghur brothers that I've spoken to, they feel terrible, they feel ashamed, they feel distraught at the Muslim communities around the world. In fact, nations, Muslim nations in particular, and their leaderships seem to have abandoned them, whereas other nations, including America and those who have been deeply involved and have launched the war on terrorism, somehow have come to the assistance of the Uyghurs, at least in word, if not in deed. Can't create our own narratives, can't lead except for a few. And it only becomes, as you said, something we're able to feel comfortable getting involved with if government policy is in line with that. It seems like we don't want to, at least with our leaderships in this country, do anything that rocks the boat too much, and that shows political immaturity.
Roshan, would you say the war on terror and its subsequent effect on the UK Muslim activist scene and the Dawah scene and the leadership scene, that one of the reasons why 5 Pillars launched back in April 2013 was that even the media outlets had been kind of affected with this internalized fear? Would you say that was true to some degree?
Yes, because I used to work in some of those media outlets. Without naming names, I could see it from the inside and how we were treating political issues. I remember once, basically, we set up an interview with David Cameron when he was leader of the opposition at the time, but he was like a year away from becoming prime minister, and everyone knew he was going to be prime minister. So we were given, an audience with David Cameron. So I was like, right, I'm in there. I'm gonna lay into this guy, and I'm gonna ask him awkward questions. And I was pulled from the interview, and somebody else who obviously would ask him much softer questions was accorded the interview with the prime minister to be. And I can think of many more examples. Collaboration with the Metropolitan Police at a time when they were conducting raids against Muslims, unjustified raids, etc., etc. And I think ultimately, I think I'm a few years younger than Moazzam, probably not a lot in it, but maybe, 5 years younger or something. But I remember Bosnia. I was at university, I think first year of university, when Bosnia was really kicking off. And I remember being deeply affected by it. And it was one of the things that made me a practicing Muslim, seeing these kind of white Muslims slaughtered in the heart of Europe. But I also remember at the time, the scene at university was kicking at that point. You could say whatever you wanted. And obviously we had characters like Umar Bakri who were touring, the United Kingdom, all the universities. Hizb ut-Tahrir was very strong at universities at the time. And basically Islamic societies, we could say whatever we wanted to say. No holes barred. And we had some really kind of, sometimes it went maybe a little bit too far, but overall we had lots of debates with non-Muslims, and it was great. It was freedom of speech. It's what universities, academia should be all about. But now if you go to a university Islamic society, it's dead. It is dead. They can't say anything. People like Moazzam, I know you do get invited a lot, but us a lot are a bit too hot to handle, quite frankly. Prevent will be in there trying to shut the event down. And I think, Muslim leadership, I think we're intimidated. We've been intimidated by government. We've been intimidated by the mainstream media who demonizes, drag our names through the mud. Either that or we're co-opted to a certain extent. We want to get around the table, we want to get in the corridors of power. And we start saying the right things, we'll get those OBEs, we'll get a seat around the table of power, we'll have more influence. And I think, the ordinary kind of Muslims are stuck somewhere in the middle. But I don't know. I just come to the conclusion that, what I want to see from Muslim leaders is I want to see lions, not mice. And I think we got far too many mice. And I think now is the time for lions. And, I can't quote as much Quran or Hadith as you guys, But I looked at the life of the Prophet, right, and how he dealt with the Quraysh, and the bribes that came his way, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how he refused to compromise, and how he would not stray from the right path. And that's what I want to see from our Muslim leaders in this country at a time when we're being oppressed. I don't see it, unfortunately.
Moazzam, is there a fine line between a victimized mindset? So this is something that we've spoken to brothers who are close to us, who are dear to us, who love us and we love them. But they have at times suggested that continuing with this kind of war on terror narrative that Muslims are oppressed is, so whilst we're critiquing those who have internalized fear, they would counter and say, well, the likes of yourselves have kind of perpetuated this victimized mindset where we are just oppressed and oppressed and oppressed, and that's it. We know of a dear brother, mutually close to both of us, who once said that maybe even drop the war on terror actually as a kind of terminology. Do you recall a conversation like that with one of our brothers who are dear to us?
Yes, I do, and I know some brothers who feel this way, and some of those brothers have suffered themselves. So it isn't that this isn't just people talking from having no experience. It's just a conclusion that they've come to. The problem with that is that it, whilst I do agree to some degree of that we should see, there's one of the great companions of the Prophet said, I used to ask, his name was Haydar ibn Yaman, and he used to have the secrets of the Prophet. And he said everybody would ask for the good from the Prophet, but I would ask the bad. I would ask bad things. And it was asked of him, why would you ask that? And he said, so I could keep away from it, so I would know. So there's always, we have to get that balance. That when we're talking about, I don't like this term victim mentality, because what it does, imagine if you took a sister or a woman that's been raped, and then you say to her, you're seeking your rights. Can you stop being a victim? Stop being a victim. This language of, it takes away from those who've actually been victimized. It takes away from people who've been killed, who've been, or family members have been killed, who've been tortured, who've been detained without charge or trial, who've lost livelihoods. It takes away from their experience. And so to say this victim mentality is it's deeply unfair for anybody to say this. Now, if you want to say, say something positive, that's different. That's a different language that we should say. We should say, what can we bring out of it that's positive? As an example, I give often that when I give those stories from Guantanamo and the emails and so forth, they're always uplifting. It's a very terrible story, but it talks about how, for example, we memorized Quran, or brothers memorized Quran, though the Quran was ripped in front of us and thrown into the toilet. We didn't have a Quran, but those who memorized taught those who didn't know in the old way, the way the Prophet ﷺ taught his Sahaba, because the Quran wasn't in a book. So that you see straight away that the Quran has been desecrated, you're victimized, you're tortured, you're abused, but despite that, you rise above. Another example I give is when the brothers, especially myself, have friendships with the Guantanamo guards who come over here, and several of them have took their shahada. Okay, that's a story of pain. These guys were involved in our abuse in some ways, but we do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, that you forgive, it's closer to taqwa. And these brothers, these are now our brothers who campaign against Guantanamo, and yet once they were guards there. So that's what we have to do. We have to tell those stories that strengthen people and make them feel, without taking away from the experience of those who've been abused, tell them about the positive aspects. So I think that we need to bear all of that in mind, and Islam is a deen that is of the middle path, and we should make sure that people hear both sides of that story.
A very important piece of research that was carried out by the University of Lancaster by Professor Paul Baker. He basically looked at 200,000 newspaper articles from 2003 or 4 to about 2011. 200,000 newspaper articles from the mainstream British papers. And he basically, from his conclusion, he drew some numbers, and he said that, look, from every article which appears to be positive, there's 21 negative articles, right? And terms such as extremist, radical, Islamist, fundamentalist, misogynist, and every other ist under the sun is what was associated with these negative articles. The article which appeared to be positive, it had very little to no mention of Islam and Muslims. So someone who was a Muslim who did good, they were British Pakistani, they were British Bangladeshi, they were British Indian, or they were just British. There was nothing about their Islam or them being Muslim. Even when those positive stories, the main people who were part of the stories did many of these things that were newsworthy because they were Muslim. So given that the time, I remember Moazzam, we also are aware of a sister in America who done very thorough research about how many times Muslims have condemned acts of terrorism, right? So this is the context and reality in which Five Pillars exists, that we came about. How important do you think it is to have a Muslim media outlet like Five Pillars, regulated, qualified journalists, myself from Roshan, professionally trained in the industry disciplines, as are many of our contributors, trade union members, recently accredited via mainstream watchdog, to still be holding on to very mainstream normative values and actually defending those who have been affected by the war on terror and CVE policies?
Well, look, I've worked with Roshan before in the past many times, and when he was working with press, he was working with Islam Channel, so I've known what his pedigree is. And when you know somebody's pedigree and trust it, so it doesn't matter which organization they end up going to, you'll always going to have that. So I've always had that connection with Roshan, and of course with you, I've seen you go up the ranks from writing for Huffington Post and from Middle East Eye and from all the interviews that you've done. And of course, all of that, seeing that coming together in Five Pillars for me has been something. In the beginning, I have to say, I wasn't sure. I thought, what is this really a media organization, or is it just a bunch of guys pretending? But as I've seen it develop over the years, and I don't easily submit my articles to just anybody. The fact that I've felt comfortable to send them to Five Pillars, for me, I mean, I know maybe I'm biased. Is as somebody who's written for the Guardian, for the Independent, for the Washington Post, for the New York Times, and all of those, and to submit my articles and have them published on Five Pillars actually connects me back to my community, and so that is something that I when I submit articles to you guys and you publish them, it's a sense of alhamdulillah, this is going somewhere where it wouldn't go if I put it in those other papers that I've just mentioned. It's been a
while. Can you submit another one, please, Moazzam? Yeah.
I think the last one I submitted, I really enjoyed the last one I wrote because it was a complete dissection of France and what France was doing, looking at historically what how the founders of France actually praised the Prophet ﷺ, and how today's French leaders would be a disgrace even in their eyes, even in their libertarian eyes.
You know that article that you wrote on France? It actually led me to do a course on the French Revolution on Amazon. When I say do a course, I've got Amazon Prime, and I don't want to plug them too much, but there's a series called The Great Courses, and one of them is the French Revolution. And it was your article which sparked that interest in me. And boy, what you said was right in terms of how modern France, was born from terrorism, was born from head chopping, literally was born out of terror and decapitation. And obviously we have that legacy has lasted several hundred years, hasn't it?
Yeah. And again, so the fact that, as I said, me seeing the development of Five Pillars over a period of time, I would say that in the past it was a little bit tabloidy, right? And maybe that's part of the kind of raison d'etre, is to respond to the Daily Mails of this world. But
should we not fight them the way they fight us, Moazzam? Come on, man.
Fight them the way they fight us. Yeah. Well, it's a perspective, and as I said, if I completely oppose that perspective, I wouldn't be sharing your articles or writing for you. But I think it's developed in something more than that. It's become something that's a mainstay of the Muslim community, and it's become something that we should be not only supporting, but should be proud of, that we have this in our midst, especially with people like you who have gone through the various stages of journalism and have come to your independent conclusions that operating within the mainstream media is not necessary for us to have the media that tells our side of the story. And that's all that was required. It doesn't mean that you have to shun that mainstream media, but it simply means that you create your own space. And creating your own space essentially says that we are capable of building ourselves up, in the way Malcolm X used to say, I'm ready to work with everybody, but I want to build my community first. And I think that's absolutely right in a place where we are relatively new as communities, settled communities here.
Roshan, before we start the second segment with Moazzam, can we just play his testimonial video from
sure.
Ramadans ago. I'm not sure if his beard will be as white as now, but let's see. This is a message from my brother Moazzam a couple of Ramadan ago.
Okay, Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man la yahtam bi umur al-muslimina falaysa minhum." Whoever does not concern himself with the affairs of Muslims is not from amongst them. In this regard, the largest Muslim media organization in the West is Five Pillars, an organization that is called regularly upon mainstream and alternative media to comment about the affairs of Muslims in Britain and beyond. So please help and support Five Pillars in the work that they do. Jazakumullah khair wa Ramadan Mubarak. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
The beard's more or less the same.
Alhamdulillah, that message was short and sweet, just like me.
Yeah. Look, brothers and sisters, that was a brief message from our dear brother Moazzam, who's with us now. Please donate generously. The link will be at the bottom of the ticker. It's also pinned on YouTube. That's fivepillarsuk.com/live. The bank details are there at the bottom if you're unable to make an online donation. The PayPal link is at the bottom, and I'm yet to receive a phone call, so please call me. I get a bit lonely sometimes. So give me a call, let me know what you're up to, and let us know what you think of the conversation thus far and any question that you have for our dear brother Moazzam. Tonight could be Laylatul Qadr. And as my brother Salman Butt from Islam 21 said to me recently, don't worry about what the odd night one. Just consider all the nights as if it could be Laylatul Qadr. So please, brothers and sisters, dig deep. And if you catch it, it could be a night better than 1,000 months. And just think about the multitude of reward that's involved. We don't say it lightly. And I say this to you because whenever me and Roshan speak, whenever we have editorial meetings, whenever we have meetings with our scholarly panel, which we formed 2.5 years ago, we are confident that the sole reason why we wake up every day and the sole reason why we worked for not a single penny for the first 4 years of Five Pillars was because we see this as a fard kifaya. This work that we're doing, someone has to do it. There is an area of the Ummah's reality today where we're being attacked. And it's daily. We're being bombarded. So someone has to do it. Someone qualified and experienced has to do it. And we're happy to take up that responsibility. But we require your help. We require your assistance. And I know many organizations during Ramadan, they give you these scare story scenarios. Oh, we're gonna collapse and we're gonna finish. No, Five Pillars will be here. Inshallah, so long as Allah gives me and Roshan and our team life and tawfiq, we will be here doing the work with money or without money. But the point here is the quality, the quantity, the effectiveness of it requires funding. And we need the community to dig deep, especially if you're looking to stay in the West for years and decades to come. You need a strong Muslim media outlet. Look at how the Jewish community support their media outlets, the Jewish Chronicle, the Jewish News, Times of Israel. They don't break no stories to the mainstream media. It is always their own media outlets that break the stories to the mainstream. The Jewish media is a gatekeeper between the community and the mainstream, right, Roshan?
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
And we've seen, just a few examples, we've seen this with Five Pillars with Shukri Abdi. We've seen this with Five Pillars with the parents protesting in Birmingham. We've seen this with those two sisters that were bullied in Sheffield. That once the stories come to Five Pillars first, the mainstream has to now come through us, either for the story or they have to adopt a narrative that is similar to ours. That's the position we want to get to. So the more funding and the more support we have from the community, the better we can do this work, inshallah. So brothers and sisters, please donate generously. The second segment of today, Moazzam, I know we've got you for about another 15 minutes or so. Syria. And I want to link Syria back to something you said to me about mine and Roshan's partnership, is that sometimes I wonder how you two have made this work for so long. And I know that when me and Roshan review our relationship, we mostly agree on most things. But Syria was always an area of contention for me and Roshan. At times where we're telling you for the first time for our viewers and our listeners, where me and Roshan have fallen out sometimes as brothers over Syria. And Moazzam has sometimes had to give us both advice and has to sometimes mediate. Alhamdulillah, we've overcome that now. It didn't happen too often, but it did. How divisive has Syria been in terms of the Muslim community, its leadership, its du'at, who are very vocally supportive to begin with? And then either they've done a 180 turn or they just went shtum.
I mean, of course, Syria is something that's been very, very close to my heart. I have been in Syria. I have seen Syria firsthand. I've lived in Syria during the revolution, or at least part of it, and I've been imprisoned for it. And to this day, I remain passportless because of it. My bank accounts are regularly closed down as a result of it. And so, you know, I know deeply and have experienced personally the British government's Islamophobia when it comes to Syria. It has been a fault line, there's no doubt about it, and there are fault lines throughout the war on terror that have been relit. I've always been an advocate of not playing to those fault lines, but unfortunately that does happen, and it has happened. What I would say here, and what I've tried to counsel both of you on, as I remember, is to say that whatever differences there are about things abroad, that there should be at least unity here, because we face similar, even with communities, I say, that we might disagree with, we face similar, in fact, the same Islamophobia, the same levels of Islamophobia. Our opponents and our detractors don't differentiate between that. Nonetheless, it must be said that there are brothers that we are close to on the ground that I speak to regularly, families that I speak to regularly, who have been terribly affected by the Assad regime. And it's something that I used to say to our brothers from the other side, as it were, who kind of politically opposed the revolution, or at least started to oppose it, because I know in the beginning they would call it the Islamic Awakening. And that is that, let's be under no illusion, Bashar al-Assad was working with the Bush administration in the rendition program. How do I know this? Because several Muslim men were handed over to the Assad regime by the Americans. And the Americans threatened to send me to Syria if I didn't cooperate with them. So I knew all the way along, and I know the names of the individuals, and I've done deep sort of investigations in that, is that that definitely happened. So what's left then is kind of the political, you know, where do you stand politically and so forth. But I say, come back to this common denominator here in the UK, is that we all face Islamophobia here, whichever background we happen to come from. And on that we should unite. And where there's disagreement, I think what you guys have done, again, I don't know how you managed to do it, because I think that's not an easy thing, because, you know, people have fallen out over these issues, and the fact that you guys are still together shows the maturity of the organization, where both views can be projected, though you differ. And I think it's an example. It's a very good example for Muslims here.
Roshan, how difficult has it been at times between ourselves as friends and partners and editors of Five Pillars, as well as editorially covering Syria? Give me your honest thoughts with regards to how in previous years.
I mean, look, we've worked together closely for nearly 8 years now. Is it 8 years? It is 8 years, isn't it? And I would say that taking the whole 8 years as a whole, it's probably the best working relationship in my life, you know, with anybody.
Yes.
But obviously in that time, we've had a few tiffs, and we're different personalities, and, you know, there's quite a lot of difference between me and you in not just age or whatever, or ethnicity or outlook, but in many different ways. You know, you're an emotional guy. I'm like a robot, you know, I've got like no emotions whatsoever. And, you know, if I see someone cry, I'm just like, oh, can the earth swallow me up? Whereas you'll cry along with that person, you know what I mean? So we're different. And yeah, so on Syria, we did fall out a few times. I mean, you were obviously a big supporter of the Syrian revolution. I wasn't. Just to clarify for anybody, I mean, my views, I think, in terms of the global ummah, were definitely in the minority. It wasn't out of any love for Bashar al-Assad. I know the guy's a torturer. I know the guy ran a police state. I think it's because of my experience covering wars in the Muslim world, beginning with Iraq, but Lebanon, Gaza, Libya, etc. I kind of knew what was going to happen, or I thought I knew what was going to happen right from the beginning. I thought there are so many political actors at play here, powerful political actors, that this revolution is not going to succeed. And what it will lead to is a bloodbath, because Iran will join, Russia will join, America will join, everyone will come in, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and it will lead to a blood path. So I guess it was on cold political calculation that I thought this is not going to lead to anywhere good, and it's not going to lead to the Islamic society that we all want. That was my hunch, and that was my reasoning. But I don't want to kind of replay it. It's just a disaster. It's a tragedy. It'll take generations to heal in terms of the wounds.
What about editorially covering it? What about editorially?
Yeah, editorially, we had a lot. We had at the beginning. If I'm honest, you might disagree with me slightly, but I'll tell you how I saw it. At the beginning, we were like, let everyone say what they want to say.
Yes.
So we had articles supporting the revolution. We had articles criticizing it, and whenever we had an article supporting the revolution, a lot of people would complain about it. When we had articles from the other side, other people would complain about it. And it was just a headache, I think, for me and for you. It would lead to arguments between me and you. And then we gradually came to the realization that maybe it's a little bit too much fitna going on at the moment. So we took a little bit of a step back. And yes, we still covered it. And especially when it was in the news and something major happened. But I guess from a more neutral perspective, a more kind of factually reporting perspective. But when we did include opinion pieces, I think they were more from your point of view, maybe to reflect the views of the global ummah. And it still goes on today. You know, what is it, 10 years or more now?
10 years. Moazzam, what made the Syrian revolution? Let's be honest. You and I dedicated an entire podcast to this, where we initially planned to speak about so many things. It ended up just being about Syria. To begin with at least, why did Syria stand out in compared to the other uprisings, Tunisia, Egypt, Yemen, Bahrain, Libya? Why did Syria stand out? Why was there a level of sentiment that was very different to Syria in comparison to the other countries?
Well, there's the obvious ones, right? Because Syria being part of Bilad al-Sham, all the ayat of the Quran, in Surah al-Isra, the ahadith of the Prophet إِذَا فَسَدَ أَهْلَ الشَّامِ فَلَا خَيْرَ فِيكُمْ. If the people of Sham are corrupted, then there's no good left in you. There's so many ahadith about Sham and its beauty. So many Sahaba buried there. Khalid bin Walid, Bilal ibn Rabah, Abu Ubayd ibn Jarrah. I mean, some great, amazing Sahaba. So it's just the land that feels muqaddas. It feels like it's pure. It has some kind of purity. That's how it felt to people. Of course, anybody reads the history, it's been fought over 100,000, hundreds of times, and lots of Muslim blood has been shed there, and lots of Muslims have killed one another there, if you look at it in reality. So it was a kind of a bit of a utopian notion that perhaps something could be done over here. This is different. People are, and having lived in Syria and I lived in the countryside with the village people, but those people were they were different. They're completely different to people I met in Bosnia or in Afghanistan, where I've lived also in war zones. These people their hearts were very, very soft, and they really wanted to absorb what was coming from outside, and there was a lot of husn al-dhan, or belief that people here had come to help. As opposed to other places in Libya, I've been to Libya during the revolution, as well as Tunisia and Egypt, and it was so different there. And there was, of course, the history of these people. They'd risen up against Bashar, at least during the Hama uprising, Bashar's father rather, and had suffered already greatly. Tens of thousands of them were killed. So some of them were their children, their nephews, nieces. I met them, many of them, and it felt like this is a step. This is a continuation of that. They've been waiting for this opportunity. But as we know that I think we probably all agree that what it's become now, a tragedy, terrible miscalculation, the rise of ISIS and the destruction of that revolution and so forth has changed everybody's mind. But I would say that everybody in the beginning, if you recall, Roshan, that even the likes of Press TV and others were I was in a conference in Iran actually when it first began, and we were having debates. I was having debates with some of them. Some people were saying, "Oh, yes, it's a revolution in Bahrain, but it's not a revolution in this place. But it's a revolution in Egypt, but it's not one in Syria." And so this was all like hitting those political fault lines of you support who you are politically and religiously aligned with. And that's a big discussion for another day. But the fact that you guys have covered it in this way, I think, as I said, it shows a level of maturity, because strong opinions, strong views on either side, and still you're able to ride that over, because 5 pillars is focused. Your focus is, of course, the Muslim world, but the Muslims in Britain and what they're facing. And you can talk to that in ways that probably hardly anybody else can.
So before we let you leave, and bringing the issue of Syria perhaps closer to home, we had a huge witch hunt under Shawcross with the Charity Commission going after charities linked to Syria. We had the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act of 2015. We had, I think, a year or two ago, we had the Counter-Terrorism and Security Border Act. We've had various, CTBS. We've had various laws. You yourself was arrested on Syria-related terror charges, and then you did not have your day in court. We were there in Mile End. I think it was the day before my engagement. On the day of my engagement, I wasn't able to make it. We had a host of speakers who were calling out for your release or an answer as to it. So I guess what ended up happening, I guess, with 5 Pillars was like, okay, fine. Due to the difference between me and Roshan and the headache that we were getting, we'll just cover it factually down the middle. But then it was affecting us in the UK. The war in Syria was affecting the community in the UK. We had people going and joining ISIS. People had felt that some kind of society had been established for them to make hijrah. We had the case of Shinab. It was affecting the community big time. We had the Portsmouth 5, we had Iftika Jaman. It was just all sorts happening. So I guess even the Syria conflict in that regard became a hot issue for Muslim organizations to stay far away from. Let's put Cage aside, let's put 5 Pillars aside. There were many organizations that simply did not want to deal with anything related to Syria, anyone related to anyone that's been in Syria. And it just became that kind of boogeyman kind of conflict, which really, it wasn't worth the headache. And that was the approach of many Muslim organizations. In that regard, how important do you think 5 Pillars has been? And obviously, whilst irrespective of minor Russian differences, we have kept the torch going in terms of how that conflict has affected us adversely as a community in the UK in terms of laws.
I speak again to the maturity of organizations that are able to put those things aside for something that is bigger and for the protection of the community. Yes, none of us like ISIS. These laws are not directly only about ISIS, and even if they were just about ISIS, they'd be applied Islamophobically. So therefore, we'd have to defend against that Islamophobia, not that we're defending ISIS. And the problem is that people couldn't see that. Most people can't see that. And so it requires a level of courage, maturity, bravery, honesty, and all of those things, which I think, we've said earlier on that a lot of our leadership in this country don't have. So that's why, that was one of the reasons why we get hammered in the press, in the universities with Prevent and so forth. We expect this now. We expect this. But this should not determine why 5 Pillars should hide themselves. If anything, now is the time to show what your colors are, what you stand for and what you stand against. It's evident to everybody now that you cannot beat the entire Muslim community down because of ISIS and try to paint us all with the same brush. And we're not going to stand for it. At least there are significant numbers of us here that are ready to say that. And 5 Pillars can, that's what I said, that 5 Pillars has been able to present that message very clearly to the community. That if you won't let us have our voice in the mainstream, we'll create our own and people will hear us. In Arabic, they say, "Raghma anfak," despite your nose, despite your big nose in the way, we don't care. We're going to tell it. And this is something empowering.
Just before we let you go, there's been a few times where you yourself have witnessed where just a mere phone call from 5 Pillars to a particular organization or to a particular university union has ruffled some feathers, has made them tell their decisions and so forth. Just briefly, ever so briefly before you part from us, Moazzam, just touch upon we might see that as something small. The fact that a Muslim media outlet can pick up the phone or drop an email and that's it. We got people worried, and people are now thinking about reinstating speakers, not cancelling an event that should have been cancelled, having to now explain why they no platform someone at the last minute and so forth. How important do you think that specific? I don't like to use the word fear, but that specific kind of like you just can't get away with it anymore.
Well, this is something if we put it into reverse, this is what happens with other organizations responding to. Say whether it's the Jewish Chronicle or other media outlets who who want to present us in a particular way. So they pick up the phone, they make a phone call to a particular venue, and they put the pressure on them. Or even in Prevent has done that to Muslim event managers and so forth. So to find the kind of reverse happening, and me picking up the phone or somebody else picking up the phone and saying, Roshan or Dilly, could you go and find out why this particular Muslim organization, or indeed non-Muslim organization, are no platforming XYZ on the basis of what? The fact that they're going to get put in the spotlight is empowering for us, because it means they will have to now be publicly answerable for a decision they've made that they thought would go away by them simply doing this and asking that organization to just keep it quiet. It gives you a voice. It gives you a place to say that I too can get some form of accountability, and I've got somebody in my corner.
Alhamdulillah, we love it. Moazzam, my dear brother, Jazakumullah khair for your time, my dear brother. May Allah bless you and preserve you in this life and the next. Ameen. Keep us in and yeah, bro. We love you to bits, and we pray that we can benefit from your counsel in the years to come, my brother. Assalamu alaikum.
Really appreciate it.
Inshallah, I hope next time I see you, at least the hair on my head will still be black, if not my beard. And we'll sit all together, and we can have a meal and together. And Roshan can be as unemotional as he wants to, and you can let it all flow.
Inshallah. Moazzam, assalamu alaikum, bro.
Alaikum salam.
Brothers and sisters, that was our dear brother Moazzam, outreach director of Cage, former Guantanamo detainee, author, podcaster, many accolades, a man with many stories, and stories that never get old. You heard from the man himself, someone who spent 3.5 years in Guantanamo Bay, someone who has been to Bosnia, someone who has lived through the years and seen many different shades and shifts within the community, has expressed that 5 pillars is absolutely essential. It is absolutely essential in the defense of Islam and Muslims, our values, our beliefs, our tenets in the UK and the West and the oppressed Muslims. Moazzam said himself that there's been cases where he's rang us, one of us, or either of us, and got us to ring up a university union, a student union, or a venue, and we had to stick it on them, right? And this has never been, the Muslim community has never been able to do that. We've never been in a position to do that. But with 5 pillars, you have that. The Muslim community can rest in peace and understand.
I've got some good news. What's our target for tonight?
500 one-off, 50 direct debit.
Khalas, done.
Okay.
I've just had a WhatsApp. I can't name him. A beautiful brother has just donated £500.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. May Allah bless the brother with the best in this life and the next. Ameen. That does not mean you log off. That does not mean you stop donating. You carry on donating. Let that be a motivation for you, my dear brothers and sisters, to give generously, to dig deep. Just because we've hit our one-off donation target for today, that doesn't mean you stop. Brothers and sisters, this work needs to continue. And it will continue with or without targets being hit, with or without salaries being taken, with or without funding being there. Because as already mentioned, it's a fard al-kifaya. It is a collective obligation of the Muslim community to support this work. Because not everyone is a qualified and experienced journalist. And if there are qualified and experienced journalists that happen to be Muslim, are they Muslim journalists who hold on to normative Islamic beliefs and defend them and wish to advance them? No. If that is the case, then we need your support. Allah loves those who spend in His cause. Allah loves those who spend in the sake of Islam. Brothers and sisters, donate generously. Tonight could be Laylatul Qadr. The Prophet ﷺ said that he loves, the most beloved acts to Allah are those that are small but are regular. So if you can't give a £500 donation or a £5,000 donation or a £100 donation, set up a direct debit, brothers and sisters. Set up a standing order. Let it be an ongoing sadaqah jariyah for you. On a previous live appeal, we showed how one infographic, one square image, which costs us about, in terms of our graphic design, if we were to break down the hours, 10 or 15 pounds. That infographic made it to BBC Newsnight, and it got every single Muslim MP shaking in their boots as to why they were being held accountable for supporting a bill which would allow pro-LGBTQ values to be taught to children as young as 4 and 5. One infographic. Now imagine your money went towards something like that. You would get the ajr for holding the MPs to account and safeguarding the future of our children. Brothers and sisters, I can name you so many stories. The parents protesting in Birmingham, the Shukri Abdi story, the two sisters that were attacked in Sheffield. There are so many stories that we can tell you, brothers and sisters, where we have played a pivotal and key role in making sure the correct narrative was conveyed. And the mainstream had no choice but to adopt our narrative. Brothers and sisters, the link is there at the bottom. Roshan, could you just possibly, just for a minute or two, just put the link above our head, above your head, please?
Yes.
So www.5pillarsuk.com/live or /donate. The link is just above Roshan's screen. The details are below. We're going to go through some comments before we introduce our next guest for today. Roshan, what comments do we have?
Okay, so let me sift through lots of assalamu alaikum, just a general welcome salam to everybody. I won't post those messages, but we do appreciate them. Bob Oscar says, "What an honor to be watching you live, brother Moazzam." Unfortunately, he's just left. We're getting this comment quite a lot, and let me read it out and I'll just respond to it. The biggest Islamic charity in Germany was shut down yesterday. The organization had more than 5,000 building projects all over the world and was feeding millions of needy people. It was called Ansar International. Yeah, AE. Look, during Ramadan, I must admit, I'm not posting as many stories on the website because we're busy fundraising, we're just generally busy, and obviously we take some personal time out as well for our own ibadah. So apologies to, a general apology to everybody for the stories that we have missed during this Ramadan. I am going to look at this story tomorrow. Inshallah, I'll do some investigation and I will post an update. Let's go.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, Bob says, nice to see you on the show. You can read out some of these comments if you want, Dilly. I'll just look for them.
No,
I'll look for good ones.
Just keep that hadith. Give charity without delay, for it stands in the way of calamity. Al-Tirmidhi. Jazakumullah khairan, social stigmatist, for that comment, for that reminder of that hadith. Brothers and sisters, what a beautiful hadith. That to give sadaqah jariyah, it stands between ourselves and a calamity. In the same way that sadaqah jariyah is a source for us to purify our wealth, to give barakah in it. And it is a source for us to cleanse us of our sins, to rid us of our sins. What a beautiful hadith that social stigmatist posted. Take heed of it, donate generously. The link is above Roshan's screen, and the bank details and the PayPal details is there at the bottom.
Roshan, I don't see our leaders in the masjids will really be the lions for us, like the likes of Khalid ibn Walid, radiallahu an, because of the subservient colonialist mindset from them in India, which we will see it's a sad state. Yeah, it is a while since I personally saw a khutbah or heard a khutbah that really got me, going. You kind of hear the usual stuff every week, don't you? Yeah. And they often, unfortunately, our imams often don't link them to kind of contemporary events, which would really kind of resonate with the masses. Let me look for some more comments. Dilly, that's an international problem in UK. It's the Pakistanis and other. We don't want to get sectarian here, do we, or nationalistic, or whatever the word is. Okay. I'm not sure if I should put these comments up with Moazzam gone.
What's
you reckon?
To criticize you for going to Syria when you're not Syrian yourself. Many say foreigners shouldn't involve themselves in Syria's internal affairs. I mean, I'm confident if Moazzam was here, he wouldn't necessarily disagree that the mindset is that if we were to just leave Syrians to the affairs of the Syrians and the Kashmiris to the Kashmiris and the Palestinians to the Palestinians and the Rohingya to the Rohingya, then defeats the purpose of being one ummah, I guess. And those who went over there, whether for aid work or any other purposes, they went there with that mindset, as opposed to causing death and destruction or further destabilizing the country, even though that's what may have happened or did happen as a result of Muslims going out there.
Yusuf, our friend Yusuf, who was on yesterday, didn't someone say, "I'm surprised you haven't strangled one another"? It was never that bad. Come on, there was a bit of awkwardness. There was a few ignored calls. Yeah, maybe a day or two where we didn't talk to each other, but it was never that bad. Come on.
And it never exceeded 3 days, as per the
Yeah, absolutely. No, maybe 1 day or 2 days. Yeah. And that was in the early days as well. It hasn't even cropped up recently. Roshan, you're the Terminator. Loved it. But Bob's getting too much coverage.
Bob's been dedicated to the live appeals, mashallah.
He has. He's agreeing with me on Syria. Okay.
An interesting cue. Although you're both different, there's a balance there. Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is, I think socioeconomically, me and Russia come from very different backgrounds, but there's overwhelmingly we agree on most things. Even though we may look like chalk and cheese, it's really not that much the case.
You know what? I'm really not. Everyone thinks it's like a facade, like I'm putting it on. But honestly, I'm just not an emotional person. And, I mean, I'll get emotional if England win the World Cup in terms of like, I'd hate it. I'd be depressed. I'd probably cry out of unhappiness. But yeah, no, I'm just not an emotional person. Let's stop. Let's skip a few of the Syria comments. I don't want to drag up the Syria issue again. Yeah, quite a few comments on Syria.
Okay. Anything before we introduce our next guest?
Why haven't we started a TV channel?
Because we've actually, if you've noticed something, brothers and sisters, first and foremost, to run a TV channel on, let's say, the Sky satellite platform, it requires millions of pounds, easily over $1.5 million, I would say, to produce round-the-clock news, documentaries, time fillers. Instead of having 3 hours of recitation from Makkah and then a fundraiser for 2 hours and just a repeat of that, if you want a proper active news channel that produces news and documentaries round the clock, easily $1.5 million.
I also think it's dying. Kind of TV channels are dying. Everyone's watching their stuff on social media, on their tablets, on their phones, especially on mobile. All these TV channels. It's like Sky, for example, and BBC. In their current format, they won't exist in 10 years. No. They're shedding audiences. The Islamic channels as well, they're all got an online presence now, whereas before, Sky was where it was at. So things are changing. Things are changing.
But, if we can raise £1.5 million, £2 million, maybe it's something we can definitely consider. But until those numbers are being hit and consistently maintained and sustained, a TV channel is way off.
Yeah. Maybe there's 3 or 4 more comments we can take. Okay. If you can read them out while I search for the good ones, Dilly.
If a venue is being pressured to close, cancel an event because of X, Y, and Z, always have those authorities the pressure to submit the request in writing. It will never happen. Yes, that's our brother Ahmed, I believe, from Blackburn, I think. MashaAllah, tabarakallah, support of Five Pillars, very active in the north. I've donated. I hope you can all donate at least £5 every day. It helps. Kindly remind your family. Jazakumullah khair, social stigmatism. May Allah accept it from you, my dear brother or sister. May that donation weigh heavier on the day of judgment on your scales. May you get a reward of all the good that Five Pillars does, inshallah ta'ala. Ameen.
All right, last one. Last comment.
Okay. Why doesn't Five Pillars start a UK-based roundtable discussion with regular hosts? A bit like the Mad Mom's podcast for UK users. Hey. Have you not watched the Blood Brothers podcast? Come on now. And we've got the big picture show. So yes, we already have a show like that. Maybe not a round table, but the Mad Mamluks who we partnered with to begin with, and who we parted from last year. We have a podcast and a news show, which Roshan has, the Big Picture and the Blood Brothers podcast, which is something similar to, if not better than the Mad Mamluks podcast. And our next guest, again, is a dear brother of myself, someone who was once a regular contributor, someone who does not want to be described as an activist, but someone who is active and very active, I must add, in the Greater Manchester area, as well as on national and international issues. He's someone who's been involved in the Dawah scene from very early on. He's someone who advises us and gives us feedback, and has done for many years. And that is the co-founder of the Myriad Foundation in Manchester, Ghulam Esposito Haydar. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers.
Alaikum salam. How are you doing, Ghulam?
I'm good. To be honest with you, I was hoping, Dilly knows this about me. I go to bed quite early, so this is, I'm staying up, especially as a favor to the both of you, especially Dilly, because I've got obviously developed a personal relationship with him. It wasn't personal to begin with. Okay. And I've got my espressos machine behind me. I've got my other coffee, filter coffee as well. I'm prepared. I prepared for this. But
I love the background as well.
What's that?
I love the background as well. It's your proper, nice vintage looking kitchen and that.
You always say that. You've really stayed at this house, so you know all about it.
It does. It's a beautiful thing. While I post the Myriad donation link, I believe you got a bone to pick with Russia. You might as well just get that out of the way.
Oh, another one. Before we start, can I ask you a question before we start? What's with the Esposito thing? What is it? Are you Spanish or something? Or I know you're not Spanish. So what's with it?
Do you want the true
Short
story
version.
or the interesting story?
The truth, please.
Interesting and short.
Okay, so I'm a big fan of international film, not Hollywood, but like French, Italian, Iranian, Far Eastern, basically alternative cinema, right? So
Yeah.
I wouldn't. This is funny. That's gonna be embarrassing for me now. So
Right.
I was a member of a independent cinema, art house cinema in Manchester. So I'd watch all these independent movies or alternative movies. So I'm the biggest fan in terms of all the different industries of Argentine movies. I think is excellent. Their films are brilliant. So
Someone.
All right.
I
So
recognize.
I'll let him take a call.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're through to the 585 appeal. You're speaking to your brother Didi Hussein. Who am I speaking to and where are you calling from?
Assalamu alaikum, brother. How are you? It's your brother Muhammad Iqbal.
Wa alaikum assalam. Is my older brother Mohammed Iqbal. How you doing, buddy? You okay?
Alhamdulillah. Okay. Anyone else calling today?
No, you're the first caller today. Alhamdulillah.
What
Jazakallah khair.
is going on?
I don't know. Sometimes the phone's blowing and then sometimes we don't get any phone calls. But Khairi, we've had some good conversations until now. What's going on?
Alhamdulillah. Good. Has brother Moazzam left?
Yeah, he's left.
Okay. No, so it's you and brother Roshan there, yeah?
Yes, Broshan and my brother, my mate Ghulam, the brother from Manchester who you've met. Zui's wedding and a few times he's come down.
Okay, alhamdulillah. A couple of things that I wanted to mention.
Yeah, go on.
Because obviously you spoke about Syria.
Yeah.
And talking about supporting 5 pillars against all the lies that other media outlets, the mainstream, are discussing about Islam or putting forward. What I want to say about Syria was, obviously the revolution, is come to an end now. And what we say is that people will agree that Assad has taken control back of Syria, yeah?
Most of it, yeah.
Yeah. So many will. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here, bye.
So many people will say that, look, this revolution, what has it, it's cost tens of thousands of Muslims' lives, and we have gained control back again. But I just want to, shed some light, something positive as an encouragement, because I'm reading Surah Buruj not long ago, yeah, and Allah Ta'ala talks about the people of the ditch. I'm sure you know about the story, where there was this oppressive king, and he wanted the Muslims, the believers, to turn away from Islam and Allah.
Yeah.
And then what happened? We know, to cut the story short, they were put into the ditch, everyone, and the world burned to life.
Yeah.
And Allah Ta'ala finishes by saying, ذَلِكَ الْفَوْزُ الْكَبِيرُ. This was a great triumph.
Yeah.
So sometimes, what we might see that, by us perhaps gaining what we wanted, as an Islamic model in Syria. But the encouragement is that Muslims are now coming out and they want to bring change. And to bring some kind of change, it's going to cost you lives.
This is true, yeah, 100%.
And what we do know is that, look, there were probably tens of thousands of Muslims who became shuhada from this.
Of course.
So sometimes what we have to understand that this is from time history, that sometimes you win some, you lose some. And it's this from the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows best. Also, if we go back to the story of Yunus alayhi salam, when he left his people, he realized these people they don't want to change. And we know what happened to Yunus alayhi salam. But when he came back, he found that all his people were going to accept Islam.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So we see, this kind of going back and forth. Sometimes Allah Ta'ala, He knows best in His wisdom when to give victory. And sometimes we see that, Muslims getting slaughtered and think, this is how it should be. But there is some light at the end of the tunnel.
Of course, and as believers, we have to think that we have to have an optimistic mindset. 100%.
So it's been nice to hear something, if you guys could probably speak about this for a moment. What do you think?
Well, Moazzam's gone, so the Syria theme has gone, but we can kind of Ghulam might have something to say because he wrote something on Iraq and Syria, and Roshan at the time wasn't too happy about why a non-journalist and a non-visitor to the country had the right to comment on these things, which Roshan has said to me in the past. So yeah, we can kind of very briefly touch upon. And the theme of today's live appeal is how the war on terror which includes Syria now, has affected the activist scene and the Muslim leadership scene in the UK. So we'll now talk about basically how events abroad has affected the leadership crisis in the UK.
Yeah, I only mentioned it because I saw some of the comments, and the Muslims are very disheartened about what's going on. But they should realize that, look, and Allah is the reason He knows best when the victory will be suitable for the Muslims.
Of course, 100, bhai. Jazakumullah khair for calling in, bhai. Keep us in your du'as, bhai. Right, so that was my older brother. Yeah, some words of hope and optimism in regards to Syria in the comments. So, Ghulam, you wrote a story once. You wrote an article once, an opinion piece. I believe it was on Iraq or ISIS, and Russia wasn't too happy about it.
Let me finish very quickly the story about Esposito.
Go on, carry on. Finish that first.
So I watched this Argentine film. The main character was called Benjamin Esposito, and it was a really good film called The Secret in Their Eyes. I don't know how to say it in Spanish. And so in homage to his character, I changed my Facebook name to Ghulam Esposito Haydar. And then Facebook never allowed me to change it back for a month. And during that time, I was the head of a dawah department of a prominent masjid in Didsbury. In Manchester, well, Didsbury Masjid. And so I would regularly send out like Facebook updates, etc., etc. But the name just stuck wherever anyone met me, and I would introduce myself as Ghulam. They would say Esposito. So I just thought, you know, why change it back? You know, it's working out for me. So that's the story behind it.
Roshan, what's your views on? I mean, just to stay, because it is kind of still linked with Syria and some of the things that Moazzam said. And what's your thoughts? I know you've had a certain policy about people should only write about what they are qualified to do, so have experienced themselves. Do you still stand by that?
Generally, yeah, of course, because views are 10 a penny, aren't they? But ultimately, informed views is what we want. And for example, I remember you writing a great article on dawah, because you're experienced in that field, but you're not experienced in Iraq. I couldn't write something about, I don't know, Gambia. You know, it's like, I mean, obviously we have views. Like I write, like for example, America and Donald Trump is something. Well, I've not been to America and I've not met Donald Trump, but all of us have a view on that. It kind of affects us to one extent or another. So on those kind of issues, I would say, yeah, fair enough.
Did Syria and Iraq fall into that though for you?
But when it's specialist knowledge, when it's really specialist, because I've been to Iraq and I've been to Syria, and I would feel uncomfortable writing about those topics, to be quite honest, because I know how complex it is in terms of the people and the stakes, and everything is just so complex. You ask, 10 Iraqis the same question, you get 10 different answers. So I just thought that on those kind of issues, and especially when there's so much fitna going on, I wanted an expert writing about it rather than a layperson.
Right, Ghulam, what's your comeback to that, bro?
To be honest with you, I understand where Roshan is coming from, but the disclaimers and the caveats are linked to what I just mentioned in my previous answer. At that particular time in my life, I was the head of a dawah department of a masjid full of Iraqis, full of Syrians, full of Kurdish people, right? And also, I would like to feel that I was informed and what I wrote was factually correct. There was nothing in there that was factually incorrect. And when I pulled you up on the actual story that you were challenging, to my surprise, as an editor, I was like, well, why did he publish it then? And your response was, it slipped through the net. Had I, right? And had I seen the article, I wouldn't have posted it. And I was like, right, that's great for morale. But
Dilly keeps night hours, where I keep day hours. So Dilly probably sneaked that one through at 5 a.m. and it was published before I could even look at it.
But I asked you some specific questions at the time, and I feel that you couldn't answer them satisfactorily. And
you know what, brother?
I felt satisfied.
I do not remember a thing.
I know you don't.
Got a memory like an elephant, because I literally do not remember this.
You know why I know you don't remember? Because I pulled it up on that WhatsApp group that the other day that I got booted out of. At the
Oh yeah. Oh right. It's obviously something that's eaten away at you all these years. Have you not? Anything else going on in your life, or?
Roshan, I think you know me by now to understand that I'm quite thick-skinned, and
So
I remember the first. Can I just tell a little story? I've only actually met Ghulam face to face once in my life, and it was at a meeting of Islamic activists, Muslim activists in Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
And just straight after the salam alaikum, it was, why have you kicked me off Facebook? And then I was like, rabbit caught in the headlines, probably making up some lie or whatever. And so that's
yeah. Well, I mentioned the bruising that he gave me with the rubber bullet, but I've recovered from the bruising on that WhatsApp. And Roshan had no idea what I was referring to. But then I got kicked out of the group anyway for still don't know why. But
okay, look. Well, given that you've been kicked out from the WhatsApp caliphate of a respected and esteemed person of knowledge, putting that aside, we did a podcast 2 summers ago, Ghulam, and we spoke about principled engagement, and Myriad Foundation, mashallah, tabarakallah, has been doing some fantastic work. We've posted the donation link on Facebook and YouTube, so brothers and sisters, please donate generously to the Myriad Foundation, who are doing a myriad of fantastic work and are fundraising for their hub. But at the same time, whilst you've had your accolades and whilst you've been, acknowledged and invited by mainstream, I think you got an invitation by Downing Street. I think you did.
Yeah, we did.
And you turned that down. How important is principled engagement at a time where many, if not a significant majority of Muslim organizations are either very scared to engage principally, i.e. hold on to Islamic values and principles, not compromise on red lines, but at the same time carry out what Islam requires them to do so in society?
It's to be honest with you, it's a constant and the reason I say that is because you've constantly got to be informed of the tactics of the opposition, because they try and co-opt you at all opportunities. So for us as an organization, from the outside looking in, we might look like a fluffy organization doing social outreach, involved in food banks, homeless work, working with care homes, working with schools, etc., etc. But we'd like to stick to what we say on our website, that we're a Muslim-led Muslim-led social outreach and educational organization based around Islamic values. Now, emphasis on Islamic values, and if you are to have any values, you're meant to have principles, and you have principles of engagement. So, if I could take that question like a few steps back, on a local level, when we first started and we started having a bit of a presence in Manchester, very, very quickly, we had people from the council that were linked to prevent coordinators, people that have dual roles with prevent and community engagement or hate crime, etc. And they do that deliberately. If you look at the theory, and you did the podcast with Dr. Fahad and Rizwan, and they go through why this is a deliberate tactic, because we're involved in trying to tackle Islamophobia, but at the same time, that person from the local authority has a hate crime hat on, but has a prevent hat on at the same time. So you've constantly got to be informed. You've got to have the wits about you to understand when you're trying, when they're trying to co-opt you and give you a platform and give you opportunity. So that's where we come from in terms of, and to be honest with you, this is where Shura with the likes of yourself, Dilly. I haven't had Shura with you, Roshan, unfortunately, as of yet. But inshallah, in the future, and others, I'm constantly making sure look, this is what we've been approached by so and so, or for this accolade, for this prize, for this ceremony. What who are they? Because we can't know everybody. And what's their background? Do you know anything about them? And what do you think we should do? And alhamdulillah, so far, I'd say that we've been successful in avoiding the pitfalls of selling out and falling for some of the traps. Because
has it been tempting at any times?
Pardon?
Has it been tempting to perhaps engage?
Of course, yeah. Well, if you look at Prevent in Manchester, it's called Rad Equal. What a name, Rad Equal, right? Anyway, so they've offered us funding, right? We could have been like chilling with like good amount of bucks, you know, running our project or whatever. And there's lots of money available, and lots of Muslim individuals and organizations in Manchester have taken that. But then what they do, and maybe perhaps in the future when you guys have a bit more time, you could look into that, Rad Equal, and how they funnel money to organizations, but then they don't call it Prevent. But the name says it all, doesn't it? It's linked to CBE. Prevent doesn't mean anything anymore. It's countering violent extremism. So it comes from that root, it comes from that branch. And if it's linked to that in any way, shape, or form, we don't want anything to do with it. And we've been offered money, like for the first few, not now. Now they know our stance; they don't even bother anymore. But when we first started, for the first few years, every so often, you know, they'd try on with us. They'll see whether we would succumb, and we haven't. So yeah, it has been tempting. And not we haven't been tempted, but it can be tempting in terms of if they're offering you 20, 30, 40, 50,000 pounds to run a project that you're already doing, that you're struggling to run, you know, a small amount of donations. This is the easy option to take, isn't it?
Of course. Roshan, you know, we always have this conversation between ourselves. There's no question about why covering Prevent-related stories are so important, but they're not always the most popular stories.
They're not.
But you insist and you persist in covering them. Why is that?
Because it's important, because it's state Islamophobia, isn't it? It's the most obvious manifestation of state Islamophobia. However, translating that to people reading it and imbibing it is tough. And I think the only way we can do it effectively is when we have individuals impacted by Prevent. You know, whether people are being stopped at airports, or whether, you know, there's a few good examples of the boy that, you know, wrote Terraced House or something in his school book. And he was,
the cucumber bomb, all those stories, the boy
yeah,
died.
yeah. So when it's individuals been impacted and reported to the counterterrorism authorities and their lives being, I remember the story that we did, this 17-year-old, he was basically stopped at the airport, and because he had a picture of a toy gun himself, he went to Pakistan and he had a picture of a toy gun, but it looked like a real gun. So his house was raided. Like they don't ask any questions. They raid the house first, ask questions later. Obviously, terrorize the whole neighborhood, a whole Muslim neighborhood, etc. So that's kind of easy to relate to. But most Prevent stories aren't, because they're about concepts and about ideology. And getting the average Muslim to engage with that, it ain't easy. So we persist with it, but we haven't completely found the solution. In terms of, like, if we do an Islamophobia story, it'll fly. If you do something on Israel or Pakistan, it'll absolutely fly. We know it'll fly. But the Prevent stories are a bit of a struggle, unfortunately.
Ghulam, how easy is it for sincere Muslim organizations, or organizations that don't necessarily have nefarious agendas or wish to seek harm upon the Muslim community, to engage with Prevent and to see it as a good thing? How easy is that, do you think, from your experience?
So it depends from my experience, how the local authority, the local Prevent authority, how they engage their tactics, because it varies from area to area. So I could only speak in Manchester in terms of my own experience. As I mentioned earlier, they all wear double or triple hats, and that's not a coincidence. So we might be doing work for neighborhood and communities as part of our social outreach, and there's a lady that's in charge in the council that works in that department, and we think, great, you know, we can work with her. But then we find out she's got a role in Prevent as well. We might be working on an Islamophobia campaign. You know, we had one called Hate is Hate, right? To talk about the statistics of Islamophobia, and we did a big event, and we wanted someone from the local council involved, and they put us in touch with the right person. And lo and behold, she was also the Prevent coordinator for Manchester. So it's very difficult. And then also, we do work with schools. So we're invited on a weekly basis to do presentations on different topics on Islam in general, and Islamophobia on PSHE, RE, assemblies, etc. Now, so because we're on the, I don't know, I forgot what the term is, like the approved body for schools for that local area, right? Now, then you think you've got the person in the education department in the council that works in Prevent that wants to then work with you or have dialogue with you. So we've got to have red lines. So it's very difficult to.
Can we have dialogue with the Prevent coordinator or someone involved with Prevent? Should we have dialogue?
My personal view is no. I don't think there should be any dialogue, and that's the red line.
Non-engagement.
Non-engagement. We know what it is. Like we've been through the stage of giving it husna then, like in 2007 and 8, right? When we don't need to, you don't get bitten from this, the same, was it snake twice or whatever? You don't do it.
The believer does not get bitten from the same hole twice.
Yeah, exactly. So it's by engaging with them, you're just giving them a lifeline, right? You're giving them the rope to survive, and we want to strangle them, right? We want to suffocate them. And
metaphorically, just in case you're listening.
Metaphorically, of course, right? Not give him that oxygen to give him, to basically say that, oh, we've engaged Muslims and this is what we're doing, etc. We don't want to be a pawn in that, because alhamdulillah, when we first started to where we are now, we're only a young organization. We're in our 8th year. We've built a credible name for ourselves in Manchester and nationally, and we could easily use as a pawn for them to present that they've worked with us, and that might instill confidence in other organizations, individuals, to then work with Prevent in some way, and then it'll just survive even longer than we want it to.
I do want to get your thoughts on some interesting developments at the back of Taste Ramadan's huge success. I believe it was in 2019. But before I do, Roshan, is every Muslim who engages with Prevent a bad person? And do they deserve to be called out?
I'm not going to comment whether they're a bad person. Ultimately, I'm not their judge.
Okay. Let me rephrase it. Is a Muslim who engages Prevent, forget whether they're good or bad, is it worthy for them to be called out?
Yes, they should absolutely 100% be called out, because as Ghulam said, like early days, I mean, I knew what it was right from the beginning, and I think most deep thinking Muslims did. But you can perhaps say that in the early days, it wasn't obvious what Prevent was. So those that took the money initially, and we know many of them, and some of them have gone publicly and said they regret it, So maybe we can make, at a stretch, we can make an excuse for those brothers and sisters who took Prevent money in the early days. But I think 13, 14 years on, it's so obvious. There's been so many studies, so many human rights organizations have told us what Prevent is. So many academics, university study, whatever. It's crystal clear now. So ultimately, if any Muslim takes that money, they're collaborating in Islamophobia. I can't say it more simple as that. I haven't got the words to express what they're doing. They are literally collaborating in the oppression of their own brothers and sisters. And we know where Prevent leads. It leads to what China's doing at the moment. What they're doing is Prevent on steroids, ultimately. Re-education camps. That is the slippery slope we're going down now. So I'm sorry, if you're taking Prevent money, I don't care what your excuses are. There's no excuse whatsoever now. You're going to get called out. You're going to get front page coverage on 5 pillars. You are going to get 5-pillared.
Yeah.
By the way, I love that verb. It's got a.
It's not a thing now, isn't it?
It's in the Oxford English Dictionary now, I think.
What I didn't love was when you had the Z. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We put that to a public vote, and it was an overwhelming no. Taste Ramadan was an initiative of Media Foundation, which you launched, I believe, in 2017 or 18.
No, earlier than that. I think it was. So it's 2021 now. So we haven't done it for 2 years because of COVID.
2019 was the big year.
So that was the 3rd year. So backtrack 3 years.
2016. Yeah, also, 2019 was a huge year for Taste Ramadan. It was a success in 2018, but there was the huge one in Liverpool. Yeah. We were talking about speakers coming on. I believe even the invitation to Downing Street, I think, was possibly as a result of Taste Ramadan's huge kind of exposure. you declined the invitation to Downing Street, and we even had to discuss some speakers now, individuals who are clearly linked with Prevent, who are clearly linked with pro-Israeli groups. One particular individual, who we won't name her, will give it the credence on the show, wanted to speak on one of the platforms. How did you tackle Taste Ramadan blowing up, turning down Miss May's invitation, and also keeping an eye on which speakers were talking under the banner of Taste Ramadan?
To be honest with you, that was difficult because it's an open Taste Ramadan. It's similar to Visit My Mosque Day, right, from Muslim Council of Britain, where any masjid can take part, right? It's a synchronized open evening of an iftar for people of all faiths and none to come to experience what it's like to fast if they want to fast, or just to experience a masjid, or just to meet a Muslim, right? And we support masajid with resources, training, all the sort of paraphernalia, the marketing, etc. So we had masajid up and down the UK and Ireland take part. We had about 110 mosques that year, and then we had last year obviously got cancelled. We were on around about 200, right? So in that sense, it's hard to control that, because you don't know who that masjid, who they're invited, or what if the city is doing a collaborative event like Liverpool did, or Waltham Forest did, etc. They can invite who they want. They have autonomy. That we don't have a particular say, and that's where we had that conversation, which was because it's an open source and anyone can take part, and we don't do a massive due diligence on who takes part. Some problematic maybe masajid or people or whatever can take part in that, right? And what happened in Liverpool in that instance, and we're not going to mention that person, was the organization in their ignorance and not knowing what this person had done from an interfaith angle, believed that she was the right, a good person to speak on a public platform. And remember, this event had the official backing of Liverpool Football Club, which is disgusting, by the way, right? Everton Football Club, Tranmere Rovers, and the local.
It was huge. It was huge.
The local constabulary and the local authority. So it was a massive cross-collaborative event, open city event by the Mersey. I think there was about 5,000 or 6,000 people who attended, right? And this person was invited by the regional network of masajid to be one of the speakers. So it was difficult to navigate, because we had to inform that organization because they've already sent the invite out, right? And why this person was problematic, and gave the reasons why. And it's just the time. It was so obviously going forward, we'd have to change how we would liaise with an organization of such a magnitude. If an event of that magnitude is to take place, we've got something in place now where if they invite anyone and it's a co-collaborative event, then we have to approve of their list of speakers. But we didn't have that in place then, right?
But that's something you can have in place now, do you think?
Oh yeah, we have it in place now.
Inshallah.
As a result of the shura that we did with you guys, right? And but this person did speak, by the way, but only for a short time, and we drowned this person out by bringing in all these other speakers.
Good.
Right? So that's how we dealt with that. But it was an oversight on our part, and inshallah we've learned from it. We move forward.
I believe our next guest is here. Before we bring him in, Roshan, can we look at some comments, please? Can we ignore the Syria comments now, because
yeah, sure. I'll let you read out the comments, Dilly, while I look for some more ones. Yeah.
Okay. No problem. MashaAllah, Blood Brothers is amazing. Thank you very much. If you want to check out Ghulam's episode, it is Ghulam. Do you remember the episode number, bro?
No idea. I remember filming it, and then I remember it coming out like 2 years later.
Nah, it wasn't a time-sensitive one. That's why, bro.
I'm only joking.
If you just put Ghulam Esposito, Haydar, Blood Brothers, a fantastic episode. I look forward to the big picture show.
So I'll do the next one after Ramadan, brothers and sisters. Take a bit of a break during Ramadan and get back on it after.
I feel 5 pillars are unique. They are proactive rather than reactive. Keep up the good work. May Allah reward the team and its support. Jazakumullah khair, my dear brother Jay, assuming you are a brother. We try our best to be proactive. Sometimes we can't help but be reactive. Sometimes we can't help but move at the pace of the community. And sometimes to mature and help develop a community, you have to at times move at their pace. Just keep us in your du'as, and most importantly, that you ask Allah to keep us, our team, our supporters sincere and steadfast upon what is most pleasing to Him, Azza wa Jal. Ameen. How come you guys not been on the mainstream media in the last couple of hours? No.
You mean probably years or something.
Okay, the last couple of years. So the last media appearance we made was the Good Morning British show with Piers Morgan in 2019. So March, it's been about 2 years. We had no control over the mainstream media inviting us. We had a golden age, which was like 2015 to 2018. Those 3 years were like the golden years where we regularly invited. Roshan took on Andrew Neil, Melanie Phillips. I had a showdown with Nikki Campbell and Kay Burley and others. And then we're pretty confident that there was a blacklist that was provided either by the Quillian Foundation or the Commission for the Countering Extremism, who basically had a big problem with myself, Roshan, and others, like Moazzam and Asif Qureshi from Page and others, that they just didn't want principled Muslims getting mainstream platforms. I had a monthly newspaper review show on Sky. I made 3 appearances, and then they cancelled me out with no good reason. So I'm confident that that blacklist is there. But the point is, we don't survive and thrive off the mainstream. That's the whole point. If we were people who just survived mainly off the mainstream, which we have no control over, we'd be nobodies. This is the important work. The groundwork is 5 pillars. And the very reason why we got invited onto the mainstream is because they understood the gravity and the importance and the exposure and influence of 5 pillars. Bro, Ghulam, amazing kitchen. Man, can I visit to cook some kaboobs there, bro? So Bob Oscar is a dedicated brother. He's donated. He's tuned into every live appeal. I do believe he likes Roshan more than me. The brother's dedicated. He's been engaging from the start to the end. May Allah bless our brother Bob, if that is your real name. I mean,
well, the thing is, Roshan get emotional about it, though, wouldn't he?
Sorry, guys, lots of Syria comments. So keep talking while I skip past them.
Yeah, Ghulam. I mean, our next guest is a brother who's a dear friend of both of ours. I find him to be quite unique in the sense that in his area of support for the community, actually has its own term, which is lawfare. And mashallah, he's had some huge victories over some big names. And it actually coincides quite well with what's happening with Prevent, having to have an independent Muslim media outlet, having principled institutions, which makes his job easier. And we'll get him to elaborate on that once he comes on. 5 pillars needs Facebook to connect with the community, but Facebook has been exposed for aiding and abetting Rohingya genocide. Yeah, Facebook have shadow banned us for 2 months without even any good reason. So we know well what Facebook's shenanigans are when it comes to censoring Muslim voices and Muslim agencies. Roshan, any more comments before we introduce?
To be honest, it's all about Syria and people talking to each other on the wall. So I think you can move on, inshallah.
Okay, so brothers and sisters, our next guest is a solicitor and a lawyer by profession. He's, again, like Ghulam, not an activist, but someone who's active on London and national and global issues. He's also cool. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're through to the 5 Pillars live appeal. You're speaking to your brother Didi Hussein. Who am I speaking to and where are you calling from?
It's Wakas again from Stoke-on-Trent.
Love it. I love it, brother Wakas calls. He never lets the side down. Wakas, what's going on, bro?
I'm not too bad. Yeah, I'm just listening to the live appeal. Brother Ghulam mentioned about problematic individuals. Now, when you have a problematic an individual who's obviously no good, right? Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I'm going to dwell on who an individual is or what his identity is. Just say if he's about to do a speech, and the particular approach would be to speak to the organisers who arrange to bring this individual down for a speech or somewhat. Now, if the organisers don't obviously cooperate and they don't, agree to it, what's the way around it? What kind of individuals do?
Okay, so I'll respond to that question on the live, and we've got a number of guests waiting for Wakas Papa. So I'm going to respond to your question, and I'm going to bring on our guest.
Okay, thank
Love, my brother. So the question was, Ghulam, before we bring our guest in, was that what do we do with venues and hosts when they have a problematic speaker? We inform them of why they're problematic. I'm assuming it was an intra-Muslim question, but then they don't take heed, which is kind of what happened with the Liverpool situation, kind of. So we'll answer that. So our next guest is a lawyer. He's a writer. He's someone who's active. Now you're making me abandon the word activist. Someone who, mashallah, tabarakallah, who has seen various developments in the Muslim community, and someone whose counsel we take very seriously, our 5 pillars, and that is none other than our dear brother Zillur Rahman from Rahman and Lloyds. Assalamu alaikum, Zil.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. How are you, brothers?
I'm good, my brother. What's going on?
Alhamdulillah, good. Apologies, slight late entrance, but yeah, I did say to you I couldn't join before 12:30, so apologies for that.
No, not at all. Sorry for keep you waiting. Zil, let's throw the first question at you then. So a brother called Waqas from Stoke, he rang and he said, what should Muslims do when a Muslim organization or institution is hosting someone who's related to Prevent, who might be related to the pro-Israeli lobby or stand interfaith with them? You tell them that, look, this is why this person is problematic. You shouldn't platform them. They don't take heed. What do you do then? What should you do then?
I mean, I'm assuming, for example, this is, if we take hypothetically, it's a hypothetical scenario, but let's say we're talking about a mosque that was doing this. I mean, ultimately, the mosque is answerable to its beneficiaries, and the beneficiaries are the community, the Muslim community. And if you ask members of the community that their mosque or their masjid is going to be hosting an individual who they consider to be harmful to them, harmful to their faith, harmful to the Muslim community, the global Muslim community, the Ummah, there's no doubt that the community wouldn't stand for that. And so those organizations, I think sometimes Muslim charities tend to forget that whilst it seems to be that there's an instance of people trying to appease a certain group or an agenda that's taking place, but they're forgetting that they're answerable to their own community first and foremost. And so therefore that's the thing that I think they should have in mind, that what they're doing, is it in the interest of that community? Is it in the interest of their donors? Because who upholds those organizations? It's not going to be, these organizations that they're trying to appease. The people who uphold those mosques are the community members. And so therefore, they've got to look at it from a reputational harm perspective. Is that going to cause reputational harm to that particular charity? Are those donors who donate on a regular basis, they may have standing orders, are they going to stop funding the mosque as a result of that? And if they are, then that's a serious issue. So I think sometimes mosques are looking at it from a different perspective, whereas that should really be the perspective I think that they should be looking at it in the context of.
And do you think there's ever a time that's justified for 5 pillars to intervene and, just remind them that they could potentially get 5 pillared if they don't fix up?
If I can add to that, yes. I was just going to say, bring that exact point in, because although our brother, who we love and adore, Zillur, has brought up a hypothetical situation, it has happened, this situation. If you recall, East London Masjid, who we respect and admire, they held an event with an organization that had representatives from the Board of Deputies, right? Not so long ago.
1918.
Yeah.
Pro-Israeli groups.
And whilst it's good to have that sort of internal pressure from the community that will go to that masjid day in, day out, what caused them to change or retract or offer an apology was you guys putting out an article and bringing awareness to this situation and why the individual and the organization who they're linked to is problematic. So I mean, I watched the show yesterday, right? And I, to be honest, you wanted to be on that show rather than this one, right?
Don't say that when Zillur's here. Don't say we've got lions. Don't say we've got lions.
Holding people to account. It's to be holding people to account, right? And hoping organizations and etc. And I think you guys, in the absence of a watchdog, for us for you guys to be that resource for us when we've exhausted other means is absolutely amazing, right? And it seems to be effective. So, like it or not, And as you guys mentioned in your show yesterday, you have a due diligence sort of procedure, you do shura, etc., that people are not aware of. It's not like you have as you've mentioned throughout, and Roshan also said, you don't have a hit list at the start of each day thinking who we can take out.
Yeah.
Right? I just think that when it comes to stuff like this, we don't, in the absence of a Muslim watchdog, Five Pillars have done a tremendous job in doing that. So may Allah bless you for that and reward you, and bring you lots of support and financial support as well, because that's what we're talking about today.
Zil, let me ask you something. Actually, hold on. I'm going to ask you something about Roshan. Can you play the clip of Moazzam from the podcast, because it's absolutely relevant and linked to today, this concluding segment of the appeal. Roshan, if you can please play that video.
Cowardice in the face of repeated attacks on Islam and Muslim people never got us anywhere. And people will remember only your cowardice, nothing else. You won't be able to set any trend for the future, anything for our future generations to look back. Because when we look back, who do we remember? Those who stood up, those who fought, those who sacrificed, those who paid a price. Who remembers those who sold out? Who remembers those who remained silent? Nobody remembers them. And if you're not remembered amongst the people of dunya for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how are you going to be remembered in the akhirah amongst the angels?
Blood Burma's podcast.
Zil, based on the comments of what Moazzam said there, brother, I know, it's something that you've always maintained, that you wish that charities, especially the Muslim charity sector, had kind of grew a backbone when the witch hunt began. And that had they set a precedent to begin with from the very onset, the sector itself wouldn't be experiencing the problems it does. I know that you and I have had conversations where we said that sometimes we create our own goals in basically inviting investigations, statutory investigations, tripping ourselves over in certain policies being written. And obviously today's theme being fear in light of the war on terror. What would you advise Muslim charities and Muslim institutions who have internalized this sense of fear when it comes to things like charity commission and so forth?
Yeah, it's a serious issue. And I think part of the problem stems from the fact that, unfortunately, and it has to be said, many of our organizations or institutions aren't run very well. And so what you'll find is that because they don't or may not always necessarily have those people that's got the skills to do the job, as it were, for the role, to be trustees of these organizations, and they're fit for purpose, they often don't know what they're doing. And sometimes you might find that there's issues in terms of the way they're doing their accounts, their policies, procedures. All the paperwork probably doesn't necessarily stack up. And so sometimes you find that some of these institutions, they're afraid of the commission coming in and maybe inspecting their books, their records, because what they might find, what skeletons is it that they're hiding, as it were. And when you're in that mindset, automatically you're going to be wanting to appease and accept anything that comes your way, because you want to avert any sort of sanction being made against you. And I think that's part of the problem, that if they were run properly, then you'd be in a position of strength, because then you haven't got anything to hide in relation to your paperwork, your documentation, your accounting, your auditing, all those things in accordance with how it should be. And I think what we should, I think it should be made, the point should be made that regulation's a good thing. I think having regulators is a good thing. It's healthy. Checks and balances, accountability. I mean, that's something that you was discussing yesterday. It's paramount. It's vital. And I think as Muslims, this is something that's, we should take, that this is ours. This is Islamic. If you think about the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, how much sort of bureaucracy that he included, the amount of checks and balances. He was looking at everything. He was scrutinizing scrupulously everything that was taking place in various different provinces and areas. And this is something that's part of our Islamic sort of narrative identity. It is an Islamic thing. So I think having the regulation there is good. And as I said, I think part of the problem comes from the fact that it's not run very well, and then so therefore, when issues arise, they find themselves effectively saying, "How high do you want me to jump?" You know, and that's the problem that you find. Whereas I think if they had everything in order, they'd be in a position of strength, they'd be confident. And again, I think part of the issue comes from this mindset that you have, unfortunately, amongst many Muslims. It's what I would say, and what many would define as a colonial mindset, or having, you know, an inferiority complex, as it were. And I don't understand this, because, you know, we're second generation, third generation Muslims here in the UK. It's no longer as it was when our parents came here. They didn't understand the language, you know, but they did best that they could. But we've gone to the same schools that they've gone to. We can read the same language that they read. We speak the same language that they speak. In fact, we can speak it better than some of them, such as Tommy Robinson and their ilk. And we can write it better than some of them. So I don't understand where this inferiority complex comes from, as though because you know, they're white, they're English, that perhaps, you know, they're a person of authority, that they must be right, that we can't challenge them or we can't hold them to account. And, you know, when some of these charities, the Charity Commission, I think 2-3 years ago, it was well known, the third sector magazine that deals with charities, as I think Claystone, which was a think tank, had produced a report about the disproportionate investigations that were taking place at the time when William Shawcross was heading the Charity Commission against Muslim charities. Where was the uproar? Where was the unity amongst the Muslim organisations in holding the commission to account? And the commission were investigating numerous charities at the time. When these commission were having their meetings with the charities, were they bringing this issue on the table to the Charity Commission, saying to them, hang on a second, we've got some questions for you. Why is it that it's been reported and it's documented that you're disproportionately inspecting Muslim charities? What's going on here? Are you discriminating against us? Why is it that you've got, and this isn't in isolation, this isn't a coincidence, because the head of the organization, the commission at the time, is someone who was a part of the Henry Jackson Society, and the Henry Jackson Society is known as part of the far right. So, you know, those links are there, but were charities confident enough to hit back, to strike back, as it were? And, you know, the Man United way, as we say, attack is the best form of defense.
Yeah, you done, yeah? Well, Ghulam, Ghulam, when Myriad get their charity status?
Not so long ago. I think it's only been about three years.
Okay, yeah. So how would you advise that charities and Muslim institutions grow a backbone? Essentially, that's what I sense from what Zillur saying. How does the charity sector grow a backbone and start perhaps the pushback to the commission itself when they've been up to certain discriminatory shenanigans themselves? Yeah. Because I don't think bravery is something that happens overnight. It's a mindset. It's something that's embedded. It's something that's internalized. So tell us.
Yeah, I mean, most obviously, like, most masajid in the UK are registered charities, maybe a few exceptions, right? But I echo what Zillur said, which is that you've got to have the right policies and procedures and have them enacted properly, so account. You can't give the Charity Commission, or let's put the CVE stuff aside for a minute, but financial irregularities and inequalities and etc. You've got to have this in place first, right? And you have the right trustees to be able to, if they don't have that resource themselves, be able to hire consultants or hire solicitors or third parties to put that together for you, and then teach you how to implement that, right? So that's really important to understand how to run a proper charity with the right governance structure, with the right policies, and how to implement them. And then when it comes to the CVE stuff, right? And this is something where a lot of, from my understanding, with speaking with Zillur privately and other charity consultants, is that they misunderstand the actual guidance on what you need to have as a policy. there's still a whole level of autonomy on how you write that and how you execute that, right? And you know, we should go to Muslims that understand CVE and understand the charity sector to be able to help you write that policy or write that policy on your behalf and get it checked over and how to implement that. So then that will stop masajid or organizations who are registered charities from being scared from hosting certain speakers or hosting certain organizations, because they can, you know, I remember, you know, and this is where I've got to praise, you know, Ira Hamza did something a couple of years ago where he was trying to teach charities about, you know, on how to regulate them, you know, how to regulate themselves and how to write policies and who they could go to, etc. And this is something that we should do as a community. Like, we should advertise who are the experts in charities, who are the expert in the legal field that can help you protect yourself as an institution. And I don't think we do that well enough. So maybe, you know,
why would one of the big five? Why would one of the big five charities, without necessarily naming them, people know who the big five are in the UK? Why would they be interested in taking consultation from some of the individuals that we know that do give fantastic advice, principled advice that wouldn't necessarily lead to self-castration? Why would they? They've been around for 30, 35 years doing what they're doing. They're a multi-million corporation, have seats at table in the corridors of power, MBEs, OBEs, left, right, and center. Why would they be interested in listening to this kind of conversation?
Are you talking about the aid charities? Are you talking about masajid now? I'm a bit confused.
No, okay, okay. We're talking about even it's charities as well. Zillur deals with masajid and charities. He deals with both. So
I think all charities should be, regardless of whether it's a mosque or, you know, whether they're set up for humanitarian purposes, because they have a responsibility and they have a duty to the Muslim community. And again, it comes back to that same issue of, you know, who's upholding these charities? It is the Muslim community by and large. So they've got a responsibility and duty to that community, where if that community is being harmed in any way through certain policies and procedures and laws, that they've got a duty to ensure that they are, you know, representing that community in the best way that they can and not being part of the problem. But you mentioned this issue at the beginning when you was introducing me about lawfare. It's an interesting term because there's not actually a clear consensus on what it actually means. Generally speaking, it's understood to. Generally speaking,
it's a term that's been coined by those who don't like the legal fight back from the Muslim community.
Yeah, I mean, it's generally understood to mean the use of law or the exploitation of its aspects of the legal systems to achieve sort of tactical or strategic advantages in the context of conflict. And in some quarters, lawfare is even considered to be a weapon of war. What was interesting was that you may recall, Cage brought a claim against the Charity Commission during the time of when William Shawcross was heading the organisation. And as part of the case, the disclosure that came through as part of the case, the documents that the Charity Commission had to send to Cage included an email that William Shawcross had sent to other board members of the Charity Commission. And in the email, he said, like all Islamists, are very skilled at lawfare, in particular libel litigation. He's talking about Cage here. And what's interesting here is, I mean, the very notion itself is Islamophobic. I mean, why is it that when Muslims are being defamed and when they rightfully challenge it, it constitutes lawfare? Why is that? Why is that lawfare? When someone's been defamed, they have a right to be vindicated and for that to be corrected. Why does that amount to lawfare?
I know you won't say it in your capacity as a solicitor, that's fine. But I'll say it how it is. It's because those who seek to harm the believers believe that they are in a state of war with us. And any kind of fight back, even through systems and processes that they have set up themselves, they champion and they value, is something that's quite outrageous and audacious to even ask to resort to it. What it really means, the way I see it, when I first heard that talk at that time being coined, in light of many of your, mashallah, very successful cases on behalf of Muslim figures and institutions, the managers vexed, isn't it? They're just vexed that there's a fight back now, and it's through a legal means which they can't really do diddly squat about.
I think it's interesting, though, going back to that email that Shawkos sent, is that he specifically mentioned libel litigation. And that's because he knows he was a journalist, I believe, himself at some point in his career. And that's because he knows that, unfortunately, in today's times, Muslims are the bogeyman of society. You know, at one point it was the Irish, another point it was the black community. It still is the black community, unfortunately, but it's also the Muslim community. And by and large, you know, Muslim community members, their sort of leaders, clerics, are regularly, libeled in the papers. And we've seen that with some of the cases that we've acted on as well. And, you know, alhamdulillah, some of you're talking about sort of the fight back. I mean, some of the cases that we've worked on have included sort of articles written by individuals such as Andrew Gilligan, which we succeeded in, Andrew Norfolk. Seems to be an issue about the name Andrew, unfortunately, here. Andrew Norfolk, again, known to the Muslim community. Andrew Neil, again, another Andrew, and Katie Hopkins, amongst others. So, valid claims, and that's not lawfare at all. That's someone exercising their right to challenge inaccurate and libelous articles have been written about them or statements made about them.
We still, three of us in this segment still haven't kind of articulated, I feel anyway, how do we instill a sense of confidence and empowerment within the Muslim sector to basically grow a pair?
I think that's I think 5 pillars plays a role, as Ghulam mentioned earlier. That or some of the speakers, I've not heard the whole thing from yesterday's, but someone saying, I think Yusuf mentioned the fear of being 5-pillared. It's a real fear, it's a real thing, which you could say is a healthy thing. But I think one of the ways of trying to instill that is by telling more of these success stories. These are success stories. Some of these wins that not just myself, but other lawyers have had for their clients as well. I think these are success stories, and they need to be shared and they need to be told, so that it instills a degree of confidence and empowers others to stand up and think, well, actually, it can be done. There aren't any consequences here. The fear that I was thinking is irrational. It was more than I was thinking here. And also, I think, secondly, the some of our imams, shuyukh, they also need to play a role in conveying this to the community on a regular basis. And I think I made a comment to a number of shuyukh that I'm in contact with a while ago, and I said to them, can you please, in every talk that you do, can you please dedicate even 30 seconds of that talk, even if it's on wudu, whatever it may be on, even 30 seconds to empower the community to have confidence and to stop being afraid all the time, because the Muslim community, unfortunately, we're gripped by so much fear that we can't do anything, and that needs to change.
If I may just add, right, and I think we're missing one key component in this, right? There's an organization in the UK, a Muslim organization, that gets a lot of Home Office, Prevent, DCLG funding, that goes around training mosques on charity policies and governance, right? And they trick mosques and charities, right?
Associates.
Yeah, right. Into compliance. Okay, so faith associates, that they've got to comply with Prevent, or they mislead how their policies should read and how it should be implemented. So you need to counter that. There needs to be, in my opinion, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of people in positions in charities that are trustees or operate, or people who are running on the boards of these charities, and they include masjids, and I'm emphasizing masjids here, masajid, that they're just ill-informed. They're good people, but they're ill-informed, and as a result of, and you've got an organization that are going to come here and give you all this free glitzy training packages and how to implement it, how to audit you. We need something that is grassroots, where we can fund something similar for mosques to use, or mosques have got to pay for it, right? So, and I think that's important, one. Two, in terms of other organizations and growing a backbone and not
But
taking.
the MCB might do that. I'm hearing news on the streets that MCB might end up doing something like that. It's a very,
Right. Well, if they're doing it and they're going to do it properly, and it's not going to be, and it's going to have something in there that shows you how to avoid the pitfalls of prevent and CVE and how to have a backbone, then fair enough. Good. We should support it. Right. But the problem is,
do you think MCB can pull that off, Ghulam?
Personally, do I?
Yeah. It's in an individual capacity. Do you think MCB can pull off something that principle?
I think they've got the potential, with the right people. Of course they have, because
Sister Zara's too busy doing interviews and stuff at the moment. So
right. But I just feel like with a lot of organizations, they've had their chance. Let's see if, I don't know. Inshallah, may Allah. That's all we gotta say.
I like that. Roshan, can we take a few comments before I take concluding comments from our brothers today? By the way, that was no shot at MCB. I'm just saying, innit? If you're going to do it properly. And Sister Zara, mashallah, is very busy with lots of interviews about being the first woman and being young and all them kind of things here. Alhamdulillah, I've been able to set up a direct debit. Proud of you, brothers. Keep up the work. Jazakumullah khair, my brother Jay Al-Walid. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make your way heavier in your scales, my dear brother. May Allah accept you, make it be a source of purifying your wealth and cleansing you of your sins. Ameen, my dear brother.
Also, just one thing, right? Another way in terms of how we've avoided, so for example, Taste Ramadan, right? It costs us a lot of money, right? To run that campaign. Now, if Radical or Prevent or someone said, here, take 50 grand, take 100 grand, it would be very easy for us to take. But we've taken the approach that actually there's so many Muslim charities that we could possibly approach. So let's write a business case for why it'd be beneficial and how it's in line with their charitable objective for them to depart and sponsor this initiative that we're doing, right? So, alhamdulillah, Al Khair Foundation, they've sponsored the 3 years that we had Taste Ramadan running. They sponsored it 3 years in a row. And so what I'm trying to get at here is that when it comes, if funding is an issue, and that's one of the pitfalls that traps Muslims into engaging with nefarious agendas and bodies, then there should be a Muslim alternative place for these masajid, these smaller organizations to go and receive grants. And alhamdulillah, I'm offering this as a service for anyone. We've kind of been successful at that at the Myriad Foundation. Some of our projects are quite self-sustainable because we can't fund it directly ourselves with the amount of donations that we have, but other bigger national or international charities that are Muslim are able to offset some of the money that they have as part of their budget. Some of it's allocated for national UK-based domestic projects, and they don't have the infrastructure to deliver them. So they want to have partner organizations that they will work with. So we had the self-isolation project during the pandemic, and we were supporting 600 families a week with food parcels, right? And that cost us like 2 or 3 grand a week. But we had, I think, at different times we had different charities. We had Human Appeal, we had Islamic Relief, and I believe there's another charity now that are sponsoring that. But we've put a case forward. So if you want help with that, if you feel like we have to go to these places that have agendas for grants, we can present to you an alternative, inshallah.
Inshallah. Abu Ahmed Makda, he said in October 2016, when the Charities Commission came to town to discuss governance on faith charities, I called out the Islamophobia against Muslim charities. Lo and behold, a police officer was there, and after the event, he had a chat with me. I gave her a piece of my mind too. Zillur, why can't Muslim organizations just take the money and tell the prevent coordinators to go do one? Can we do that? Or is there some legal stipulation that there has to be certain levels of deliverables if we take the money? I'm just experienced. Can we not just take the money and be like,
I've never dealt with that type of money, so I don't know what strings it comes with. But I'm sure once you've agreed to something, there'd be an agreement in place, and you can't then just take the money and be in breach of the terms. So,
no,
I mean, it's pointless being even tainted by that money anyway. So it's best to steer clear, in my view. But credit to Brother Ahmed for doing that, and giving both the commission and the police a piece of his mind.
What about men? I don't know. Ghulam, you work quite closely with men, closely affiliated with men. What about men? What with men, Ghulam?
I mean, I don't understand the question. What about men?
Okay, come on. All right, someone's making some noise interference. It's one of you two. I don't know what it is. Sort it out, please. What is it? What's the news? What's the news? Can you hear it? Can you guys hear the news?
I can hear you.
I can hear the interference.
Is it Roshan?
I don't know. Is it?
Probably.
Yeah, it stopped now. Probably was Roshan saying. But bringing today's live appeal to a close, I want to just hand it over to you both to very briefly give a concluding message to our viewers and listeners and those who are going to watch this live appeal later about not internalizing fear at a time when Islam and Muslims are being attacked. Ghulam first.
I think from the perspective of the work that I do with the Myriad Foundation, and not acting on fear, there's nothing to be feared. There's nothing to be scared of, right? As long as you act with principles, you're honest, you're transparent, you'll have the support of your local Muslim community, and that's all that matters, right? If you have the support of your local Muslim community, they see the goodness that you do, right, and you avoid the pitfalls that are presented to you and the sort of corruption that is offered towards you, then you will thrive, you will survive, and you will thrive, and there'll be people from all over, not just in your locality, that will come and support you. Look at, an example of this is, Jilly, where do you live?
Bedford.
How do you know the Myriad Foundation?
Through you, but mainly through the work that you've done. You've just had it, innit? Like for different people.
So word spreads, right? And you end up getting support from places that you would never have anticipated. So I don't think there's anything to fear from the perspective of let your work show for itself, right? In terms of legalities and charity commission, who you host, who you engage with, etc., etc. Bring in experts like Zillur and other legal people who know how charity consultants that understand CVE, understand charitable policies, understand finance. I mean, yesterday you had brother Umar Suleiman, and he was an auditor to begin with, but he constantly acts as an advisor to charities in terms of how to regulate themselves financially and to make sure that there's no angle of attack potentially for Muslim charities. And so use resources like that. That's what I would say. As long as you're doing everything above board and professionally, and you have the right people in the right place, and if you don't have the right skills yourself, identify that and bring in others as consultants and pay for that service, because in the long run, it'll be beneficial for you. And I think also, as a side point, as a Muslim ummah in the UK, we should support initiatives that fund organizations to empower themselves. And you guys are one of them, Dilly. You've offered us media trade. You offer, just one thing I want to mention, right? We get as an organization so many media requests, right? And who do I go to consult when we get a media request? Exactly, right? Because you're the expert in that field, right? And I will say, this is the journalist, this is the outlet, this is what they're kind of asking us to comment on. how should I respond? How should I respond? Should I accept the invitation, etc. So we should have some form of a network or A to Z directory. I don't know what you want to call it, yellow pages, where we can go to the right people for the right assistance at the right time for the right thing. And I think if we do that, alhamdulillah, we'll run smoothly. There's nothing to fear.
Jazakallah khair. Ghulam, jazakallah khair for a very clinical concluding comment. Zillur, you're a man of history. You're a man of heroes. You're a man of revival. When you're not doing legal stuff, I know that can't be me, surely. Can you hear me now, brothers?
I can.
I can't be me. How can it be me? Can you hear me clearly?
It might be.
It's Zillur. Roshan just went, is Zillur.
It's me.
What are you doing, Zillur? Tell me now, innit? We're supposed to be concluding in an empowering way. We're doing like this predatory normal activity thing here now, yeah?
I'm not even moving.
Oh, okay. Let's just take a moment's silence for whatever's happening in Zillur's mind.
Southeast London, isn't it?
So Roshan will unmute his mic, it goes. Roshan, mute it again.
Yeah.
It's something happening with Zillur. Okay, unmute him again, Roshan.
And then even when you muted me, I can still hear it.
Okay. Well, I pray there's no one observing Ramadan with you in your yard, inshallah. I hope that's not the case. Listen, I can hear you, but I think everyone's hearing this screech. And I really want to hear you. I want to hear your concluding words of empowerment.
Do you want me to log out and log back in?
Yeah. Leave and then join back again, please.
Yeah.
That was pretty freaky. Ghulam, you feeling tired?
I'm always tired, bro. I've been smashing it with football during Ramadan, alhamdulillah. So I've been playing every 2 days, and today was an intense game, so I'm feeling it. But this is anything for you guys, man. Honestly, I mean it, and I'm a man of props, and this is what I have for you today.
Oi, takbir! Allahu Akbar.
So inshallah, I'm putting money where the mouth is, and I'll be donating as well, inshallah, today.
Jazakallah khair, Majid, brother. Well accepted from you, my bro. Your contribution from the early days to your advice is something that we take very seriously, my bro. And I say that, a lot of people said when we first publicized the guests, if you look at the lineup of guests, even the ones they weren't. Oh, here it comes. I heard it straight away. As soon as Zil joined, I heard it. Did you hear it, Ghulam?
I did.
There's something happening. Right. Zillur, give us some words of empowerment and inspiration for the community, my brother. You're a man of history. You're a man who talks about revival. When you're not doing legal work, give us some words of inspiration and empowerment for the community, especially those who are within the Muslim sector, charities, masajid, grow a pair, inshallah, strengthen themselves for the challenges.
Yeah, no, I don't know that there's much more I can say than what's already been said, but we are living in some difficult and unprecedented times, and I think listening to your recent podcast with Omar, I can't pronounce his name, so I'm not going to try to. That's the one. I'm not going to pronounce that, which was was a really. I forgot to comment on that. Actually, it's an excellent piece. Actually, really interesting. Some of the things that were discussed, and one of the points that was discussed, of course, is that we are living in unprecedented times, difficult times for the Muslim Ummah. Who've never really been subjugated, sort of universally. As we've seen, I mean, we've had periods that have been really bad. Of course, the instances that come to mind, of course, the Crusades, the Mongol invasion that took place, where you could have argued, for the first time since the Battle of Badr, that the whole entire Muslim community at that time was at threat. There was always a rise and fall in terms of Muslim power, and that's something that's not been there for a period of 100 years. But being as that may, there are still many positives, and I think the podcast that you had mentioned some of those. I think Dr. Umar mentioned some of those, which was really interesting. And I think we've got to see it as, you know, we've not been brought in those times. We're not in the period of the Crusades. We're not in the period of the Crusades. You're in this period now, and you've been put in this particular period for a certain objective, for a certain purpose. That Allah hasn't brought you here without purpose. And so the question is, of course, seeing the situation, what is it that you're going to do? But on the issue about fear, I mean, most of the time we find fear, it's usually irrational. The things that we think of are usually the most extreme scenarios, extreme cases of what may take place, but they very rarely ever come to effect. And, you know, I think the shortest thing that I can say is what Allah himself says in the Quran, which is do not fear them, but rather fear me. And I think that's something that sometimes when we're fearing everything and anyone, that sometimes we've got to remember ultimately that we should be fearing Allah first and foremost. So that's all I can say on that. But just on 5 pillars, because of course we're here today as part of an appeal for 5 pillars, just a few points on that. I mean, I'm still surprised when I hear that 5 pillars is the only Muslim news site, English-speaking news site in the world, which is quite shocking actually, because you'd think that there would be more, and you think that there certainly should be more. But you know, I think 5 pillars has done an amazing job in the period that it's been in existence. You know, you've won that recent award where you were compared with by one of the regulators, scored against other mainstream media outlets, and you scored higher than the vast majority, which I think is an excellent achievement. And I think one of the things that's often cited, and I think someone made a comment earlier, is how much mainstream coverage does 5 pillars get. I don't think you should necessarily limit or restrict your success or measure it by how much mainstream coverage you get, because ultimately your purpose and your objective is to serve the Muslim community. And if you've got buy-in from the Muslim community, which it seems that you do, because it's the Muslim community who contact you about stories, they're the ones who are telling you, can you please put out an article or write something on this? And they do so because they trust you, and they trust that you're going to do something about it, which you then do. And I think the longevity of the organisation itself, how long has it been going? Is it 10 years?
8 years. 8.
10.
8.
So I think that itself is a success story. So I don't think you need to, I don't think you should sort of covet sort of the acceptance from mainstream media. If they come along, so be it. If not, don't need them. You know, you're there for the Muslim community, and you're doing the job for the Muslim community, and that's all that matters. And you know, in terms of why people should support 5 pillars, I mean, look, I think some mentioned yesterday as well that it's Marmite, or maybe that was about you, Dilly. I think some like you, some don't. But it's not to say that everything 5 pillars do, every article 5 pillars writes, that every single one of us are going to agree with it or necessarily like it, whatever it may be. But whether you like it or not, I think the fact of the matter is you've got to accept and you've got to acknowledge they do play an important and vital role. I think that needs to be acknowledged. And, you know, like Allah says in the Quran, sometimes you may hate a thing, but it's good for you. And I think, you know, we've got to at least understand and at least agree on that much, both sides, whether you support or don't support 5 pillars, is that it does serve a purpose. And that purpose should be completed.
My dear brothers, may Allah bless you both, may Allah preserve you both and your families and your project. I mean, thanks for your advice, your support for 5 pillars over the years. It's been so important to us in our growth and our maturity, and I pray that Allah allows us to continue and benefit from both your support and counsel and that of your respective organisations and law from Ameen Ya Rab. Jazakumullah khairan, my dear brothers.
Keep up, you know, if I could just say, just keep, sorry, I'm not trying to take the last word away from you, but you guys punch well above your weight with the resources that you have. you know, and
If
I could only imagine if you had the resources that was available to other news channels, even like even a fifth, right? You know, what you could do with it. Because I remember something very close geographically to where I live. You know, you guys were the main outlet to cover that story first, and as a result of that, mainstream media picked it up, and that was the unfortunate death of Shukri Abdi, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I remember that campaign because I know the sisters involved that were leading on that, and they were begging for like attention from the mainstream. I mean, not begging, but you know what I mean. Like they wanted it, right? But it's only because of the hard, you know, Roshan did a. I don't. He probably was living in Manchester and didn't even link me up, the guy, right? But he was here for for a substantial amount of time covering that story, and it was as a result of that, which other media outlets picked it up and led to a police inquiry, led to a tribunal, led to an inquest, etc., etc. So it snowballed, right? Now, alhamdulillah, it's because that limited amount of resources allowed him to do that. But imagine if you had more. Imagine you had more Roshans, more Dillies, more news teams covering different stories that the mainstream media are not willing to pick up. But because it's gained momentum, they've then picked up and it's become a mainstream issue. I'm not trying to say, oh, we want the mainstream media to pick it up. What I'm trying to say, it becomes a mainstream issue once attention.
Oh, as a result of we forced the BBC, the Guardian, the Daily Mirror, and others to now adopt a narrative which is more in line and supportive of the family.
Of course.
Or else it was just a bully. Or else it was just a girl who drowned on a summer's afternoon.
Exactly.
Because we carried that from the very beginning, and we didn't give up on the story after it was done. We kept that alive, and that's been the case with the parents in Birmingham who were protesting against the LGBTQ curriculum. There were the two sisters that were attacked in Sheffield. There were many other examples I can give, but yeah, I mean, look, if we had, forget about the fifth, if we had a tenth of the resources the mainstream has, we'd be a force to be reckoned with, man. A force, and just, you're right, with the very limited resources that we do have, which we're very grateful for, by the way, alhamdulillah, we'll continue doing what we're doing. Whether it's not always appreciated or not, someone has to do it, man. I guess.
Maybe I might start writing for you again.
Please, yeah. You just send it to me. Don't send it to Roshan, yeah. And Bill, you ain't written for us since like I don't even know. It's been years, bro. Like, it's mad. But can you both get on it and start writing, please, yeah?
Dilly, can I have one request?
Yeah, go on.
Can Roshan write a piece tomorrow about Manchester United's success in Europe and Liverpool's demise?
Okay, all right, Zillur, bye. Take care. Okay. Well, take care, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Brothers and sisters, Jazakumullah khairan. Today's live appeal continued a bit longer than planned. The conversation was very fruitful. It was very important because it was very focused around grassroots issues. It was about the community not being embedded and instilled with fear, a fear that's naturally happened as a result and the outcome of the war on terror. What we spoke about in the UK, no doubt, is affecting communities in North America, in Germany, in France, in Denmark, in Switzerland, in Belgium, where as a result of the 9/11 attacks, the war on terror, there's been an entire domestic and international counter-security and counter-extremism industry that's basically been dedicated towards the surveillance and the witch hunt of Muslim organizations and figures in censoring their views and their agencies. And it is in this context that we now require the Muslim community to strengthen itself. And Five Pillars is one of those outlets that sees itself in reminding the Muslim organizations and institutions and the sectors and the community as a whole that, as our respected guests, Moazzam Begg, Ghulam, Haydar, Zillur, Rahman, our guest yesterday and the day before, have said, there is nothing to fear. And I want to conclude actually on what Zillur said, because I know his audio was a bit messed up. But he cited the verse of the Quran where Allah says, don't fear them, fear me. And I think that's sufficient. That's sufficient to conclude on today's live appeal. Don't fear them, fear me. And brothers and sisters, here at Five Pillars, we are dedicated towards the defense of Islam and the Muslim community. So long as Allah gives us tawfiq and the ability and the means, we will continue doing this work. We will continue to do it with great pride and joy because we see it as an obligation that someone has to do it. Brothers and sisters, may Allah bless you all who donated. Ameen. May those of you who are unable to donate but share this live appeal, may Allah bless you as well. Ameen. Make dua for 5 pillars that we are able to do this work for many years to come, and that there are other news organizations like us, better than us, that form that can contribute towards the defense of Islam and Muslims in the media. Ameen. My dear brothers and sisters, remember the ummah in your du'as. Remember the oppressed in your du'as. Remember the widows, the orphans, the sick, the needy, the elderly, the poor, the destitute, the mujahideen and their families. Ya Allah, remember them all in your du'as, and ask Allah to replace their difficulty and hardship with ease and security. Ameen. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عني. Ameen. Jazakumullah khairan, brothers and sisters. I will see you tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala. Roshan, concluding video, please.
One of the bedrocks of being a Muslim in terms of faith is that,
as well as other faiths. I mean, let's not single out.
I get it. I'm not saying that.
Christians may feel the same way.
And Jewish community.
I get it.
When the perpetrator of these crimes tend to be Caucasian, white, non-Muslims, there tends to be a huge focus on them being lone wolves, mentally unwell.
If I spoke about Jews the way that Melanie speaks about Muslims, then I would be hung, drawn and quartered for anti-Semitism.
The thing is, we can't dress up, again, these arbitrary set of values because no one had a contribution in defining them. And
they're
basically,
not arbitrary, though.
They are arbitrary because they're being used.
No, they're because they're lived and you
they're certainly not organic. There seems to be an elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room is the dismissal or sidelining of foreign policy grievances, which is not necessarily a causative issue, but it's certainly a big point to look at. Islam is justice and compassion, and God's justice and compassion is far greater than yours, Osama. What you have to understand. But I do follow the opinion of one scholar, Imam Suhaib Hassan.
All right.
Imam Suhaib Hassan is a great scholar, and he's of my opinion. You should look into it. Emily is part of Henry Jackson's society. She thrives, her organisation thrives and survives off the pro-war agenda. So she'd get out of a job if there wasn't any war. Miss Bartlett here, who presents herself as an independent journalist. She's neither independent, and nor can she even quantify or qualify as a journalist. She's a grade A conspiracy theorist for the Assad regime.
The Ghulam Foundation is perceived as, if I may use the expression, Uncle Tom's within the Muslim community. They had absolutely no credibility whatsoever.
Help defend Islam and Muslims. Support 5 Pillars. Donate now.